all sorts of stuff here. Unfortunately, his head is just a touch smaller than mine, so I am suffering to look this good today.
Oh, well, welcome, Matt, otherwise known as Skank. Trip doesn't know a bunch of you people, so Skank actually, he's a balloon clown on the wharf in Seattle.
Trip, oh, really?
Yeah,
amongst other places, but yeah, I work at Pike Place a lot, and yeah, all over the area.
Gotcha. I lived in Capitol Hill for a long time, and then Kirkland. So I was out there for probably 14 years, something like that. So
right on. You might have run into me. Who knows?
Yeah, maybe.
and Trip actually did
folks do.
Trip actually did a couple of videos because he was in Driscoll's church in Seattle. So a lot of interesting.
I moved out here right at the tail end of that, and so I was there for like two or 3 weeks before realizing Seattle.
So the very end. Yeah.
You didn't get screamed at.
No. The good old days were gone.
Oh, too bad. I'll bring in the president now. Now we have President Foxman himself. We have a strong contingent from the Pacific Northwest today. Yeah. It's a lot of West Coasters. So President Foxman, many people will know who you are, but why don't you introduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah. I hang out in the corner of the corner with Afriel, McMo, some of those guys. And so we are constantly doing things and doing like little streams and hopping on to each other's stuff. We also have a group in the Pacific Northwest that does campouts together. So I've been doing that with Skank and Af and a few of those guys. Yeah. Also, I was told to mention McMo has a Ko-Fi. You should contribute to it.
I don't know. I haven't seen a lot of production from McMo lately.
It goes on behind the scenes.
Yeah.
Think about patrons. You got to pay for their studio time too if you really want to be a patron. Come on.
I miss the chill streams on the weekends. Those were really wonderful. So yeah, I miss it. Anyway, welcome, President Foxman. Glad that you're here. And maybe I'll bring in the another West Coaster, Mark D. Parker, the pseudo Catholic. How would you like to introduce yourself, Mark? I don't think you're a stranger to many of the people here.
No, I'm not a stranger. Is my sound okay? I'm trying to.
Yeah, better than mine was.
Okay. That made me giggle. I have nothing. I've got absolutely nothing for the introduction. At pseudo Catholic. If you want to find out more, I don't know.
Yesterday on my brief Riverside stream, a guy came out of the lurk from Holland, Michigan, and grew up CRC and is now, tried Orthodoxy a little bit and is now paying attention to the Catholics. So I said, "Do you know who Mark D. Parker is?" Said no. So many of the people here on this stream, Matt has a zine and a tiny little channel, which he's doing good things with. President Foxman has a very important channel. Mark has a very important channel. So at some point, each of you should drop the link to your channel in the comments so people can find you, get a little bit of a bump. And probably the
this was for work for Gardens Decatur. If so, it sounds from Malachi like we would be able to pick it up and bring it to our home.
What's happening?
Well, we're listening to some woman talk.
I think your wife is talking about Malachi.
Do I have to relocate? This is there's too many people in my house right now. What's happening?
Your family's interrupting your YouTubing. Yeah,
that's right. Everyone's off for this, for like the improper Good Friday. All right, we're back.
All right.
I heard Michael Martin say it's actually you guys that are out of touch with the cosmos, which is why Eastern Orthodox are so otherworldly.
It could be. I don't know. I'm not going to fight that fight. I was just trying to be funny. Okay.
All right. So most of us know who Luke Thompson is. He's a very regular streamer in the mornings, without really much of a schedule, but usually in the mornings. Luke, why do you stream when you stream?
It's what works for me. Yeah, it's the most convenient. It's usually when it's quiet. There's not other people around talking. And yeah, it's really when it works. I was just realizing this is a shout out to like Foxman and Afriel and those guys, but I saw some of Afriel's, one of his recent streams. There's some solid stuff there. I get so sleepy at night, and you guys are 2 hours earlier.
So one of the cool things about Luke is Luke watches, besides Rogan and a couple of others, Luke pretty much diets completely on the channel. And so if you really want to know what's going on in the corner, talk to Luke, because if you're streaming and you're in the corner, chances are Luke's probably seen it. So I'm
a true believer in our cult.
That's right. So that's a really good thing to know. So I go to Luke for Luke always, because I can't watch everything. So Luke's like, oh, you missed this, you missed this, you missed this. So he catches most of it. So
also Chad is great.
Yeah, Chad catches a lot of it too. All right. So Trip is kind of new to this estuary thing, so I'll explain it. He's from the pre-estuary days. We go through rounds in estuary, and the first round we've just completed, which are introductions. The second round are pitches. We pitch an idea to the group, and it can be something intellectual, something personal, something contextual, something estuarial, or you can pass in the first round. That's fine, because a group like this, we're going to have plenty of meaty pitches. And but Trip, because I brought you in first, I'm going to give you first chance to pitch something to the group to start the conversation.
Yeah, I think I'm going to pass on this first one. I think I'm not just like kind of new to estuary. I think this is literally the first time I've ever like been a part of one. So I'm going to pass first. I'm sure I'll have something for the next round.
All right. Skank, do you have a pitch for us?
Yes, I do. It's as usual going to be a little bit rambly, but oh well. So I've been thinking a little bit about. So I just recently published a zine that was on the genre of cyberpunk, which is a lot of it's about digital technology interfacing with the human being, and so I want to kind of pitch a sort of like cyberpunky theme a little bit today, and it's about the effect that media has on our interpretation of the world, and it will loop into a lot of different things here, and I think this will probably be a little bit of catnip for Luke here. But it is it's like so at least if you look back to our Jewish roots of Christianity, they have the strong prohibition against the idol, the visual depiction of God. And Neil Postman in his book had a really interesting thought about like that actually that prohibition on idols enabled the people of Israel to develop this new conception of God, because it was not determined by the visual image. And so it created this more invisible, a non-temporally located image. So it helped them to kind of like imagine like the truth about the fact that God is not located in the temple, but God is everywhere around us, things like that. And I'm just curious about all of the different ways and the different types of media affect our interpretations of reality and interpretations of the world, especially when it comes to like religious media. We were in a discussion, like I was talking with some folks recently about The Chosen, and the question of what happens when The Chosen, the TV show, becomes your primary reference point for the Gospels. You are reading Gospels through what you have seen on TV.
Excellent. Okay.
Yep.
Is that it? I didn't want to...
Yeah. I have like 3 or 4 other examples, but if we pick my topic, I'll throw those out there.
All right. Really good. Thank you. President Foxman, what pitch you?
Yeah. On my end, I've been playing around with this idea, and I've been trying to find a good word for it. But the thing that's stuck so far is called internet hygiene, I think is the best way of putting it. How do you wisely engage with the internet? And that can take a bunch of different ways, but I think sometimes we encounter new technology and we think it's a totally new realm that has there's no way that we could know how to do it otherwise. And so trying to understand it through wisdom and what are some wisdom principles we can bring into how we engage with the internet, just like we engage with other things in our lives. And then a piece of this too is the internet is full of spirits, and I'm kind of in my human maxing arc, and so how do we relate with spirits also goes into that in the context of the internet.
All right, thank you. Very good. Mark Parker, do you have a pitch?
I do. I just lost my screen for some reason. Well, I kind of was here for the group because it was a good group. Hang on just a second. Can you jump to Luke? I've got a little technical difficulty.
All right,
I'll
we
come
will.
back.
We will.
Thank you.
Luke is shaking his head at you. Luke's like, I never have technical difficulties. My live streams run smoothly. I am the master of my computer. Isn't that right, Luke?
Okay.
That is not true, but this is just Mark knows what he's doing. Mark is a veteran at this. Like, he's feigning like it's technical difficulties. He just wants the last position because he's strategic. So I think my pitch, I'll try to be succinct. I've realized that I have fewer and fewer pitches all the time because I work out all my thoughts. I think what I would want to talk about, those are both, Skanks and Noah's are both right up my alley. What I've been thinking about is a thing that Jess P and I've talked about a little bit before, and I want to start working it out here, but it's the idea of it's related to naming and almost a Rene Girard kind of idea with naming, and it's kind of connected to what Skank was talking about, because idolatry, I think, shifted from a lot of physical idols. I mean, we can still have those, to abstracted, named idols, because which I think was very connected to shifts in media and the way that we pay attention to stuff. So now when you name something, in the modern age, when you can name something very quickly because of mimetic things, naming with veiling and unveiling, Christ and Antichrist, you can name something and the thing that you name can be followed in name only. You lose the substance of the thing that you named. So somebody can say, I'm a Christian. Well, that's really connected to this corner. What does that mean? What does it actually mean to be a Christian? To name something that is an abstract, non-physical thing. And so I guess it would be in the idolatry of naming, and proper naming is my pitch.
Okay. Thank you, Luke. Mark.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Well, I can go in two directions. Have we ever done I could do a personal pitch, or I could do an idea
twice.
pitch.
You can throw two balls. That's fine.
Okay, well, let's try this one. I liked your today's was today's a homeroom? Would you call today's a homeroom this morning, PVK?
Yep.
So watching the whole thing with Bart, and I totally agree that that was a lost opportunity, that interview, because it had so much potential. But it made me wonder, is the next Protestant revival going to be an atheistic one? There's so many big voices starting to use the phrase Christian atheist. So, and then we can delve into, is that the inevitable end? It was a fairly recent interview with Tom Holland where he says that's the logical conclusion of Protestantism is atheism. I think he said that with Mary Harrington recently. So there's that one pitch. My personal pitch is how I am currently in a horrendous funk. Typically, there was a time when I was younger when I would use my moods to kind of guide my spiritual movement, to adapt and change. But I don't do that anymore. I try to exhaust the space I'm in and then make changes. Now I'm going through this Catholic thing is just, it's hard. Paul made it. Paul, with what you made it sound with Nathan Jacobs like I was taking the easy way out, and I'm like going, no, this is brutal. This is so much of. I'm so out of water. Or my native, the fish. I'm not where I'm supposed to. In many ways, I'm not where I'm supposed to be, but I also don't see it as um, a. I don't have any other alternative for me at this point if I want to keep this following Jesus thing going. And so the personal question is, it's the question is I guess you could say is somewhat ideological or idea oriented out of my personal experience, but it is, when do you tap out? You're wrestling with God, and it's like, it's that long night of wrestling, Jacob and the angel, and I think he never really taps out except the angel paralyzes his leg, doesn't he? Takes a big wound. So do I just wait for the wound? Nobody's smiling. Everybody's so serious. This is scary.
Well, when you say, do I wait for the wound? It's like, yeah, I mean, you get a lot of thinky.
What is this wrestling with God thing? And is it worth it? See, Bart tapped out. See, Bart tapped out. And maybe he's the smart one. I'm not a Christian atheist. I can't go that way. I still see spirits. That's it.
All right. Wow. No,
you asked for 2. You got 2.
No, sorry. I'm not going to pass today. I'm going to pitch. And I'm gonna edge on breaking a rule about the second. The rule about the second round is don't comment on a previous pitch. Wait till the third round to comment on the pitch that you select. But I was going to pass, but I've been thinking a lot about the relationship between the emerging church movement and the corner. Ezra's rando, which has been criminally underwatched, was just a revelation. It was a masterclass in being a rando and telling your story and getting under my skin. It was, I told him even then it was a slow burn and then an explosion at the end when sort of you could see the whole thing. And I think about Ezra and I think about Luke and I think about, Mark, your second pitch sort of provoked this in me, that so much of what we are dealing with in the corner, maybe I'm dipping into the third round already, is the dysregulation that religious pluralism has done with us. And we are wrestling with these spirits. So that's, is the corner just the next stop in the emerging movement deconstruction train? So, or reconstruction. All right, so this is the third round now, and Trip, what we do in the third round is we pick a pitch that someone else has placed on the table, or you can take 2 pitches and sort of wind them together and say, I want to point to this. This is my vote for where we begin the conversation. So out of all the pitches you've heard, Trip, what sort of is at the top of your salience hierarchy and say, we should start the conversation here?
It might just be like, because it was the first thing that I heard, and I started thinking about it. What would be Skank's talk about what happened with the banning of idols and kind of kind of trying to get rid of the temporality or like the location base of God or whatever it is that we're trying to focus on. I guess the first place I would go is, I might question the premise about whether or not that's what the idol banning actually did. But then to some extent, yeah, like what do we do with that? So anyway, that's where my pitch would be. I think we could pull it down because I actually wonder whether or not the premise is a little bit flawed. I think that there's some truth, and I think there's something that like maybe isn't actually maybe correct about that. But anyway, that would be my vote.
All right, very good. Skank, where do you want to point?
It's a full field today, man.
It is. It's a rich group.
Oh, jeez. I feel like Luke's is kind of too similar to my own in that I think I'm talking about visually what Luke is talking about verbally. And it's the desire to like to chain something to a specific cage, be it an image or be it a term. So I'll vote for Foxman's internet hygiene or internet wisdom. Like, how do we take stock of the arena?
Okay. I thought Luke was going to grab a vote there, but at the last minute,
I feel like it's because he's too similar to my own, and so I want to spread the love around a little bit.
Some estuary integrity here. Well, that's certainly laudable. Foxman, where would you like to point?
I'd like to draw like a little chain between Luke and Skank's topics. I think there's an interesting idea that I've been processing of like the way early Christians were called atheists by the surrounding areas. This like desacralizing of the pantheons that were there, and then this kind of resacralizing. They're kind of jumping back and forth. That's kind of the naming and unnaming pieces. So my vote's for Skank, but kind of drawing in some of the points that Luke was making.
All right, very good. Mark, what would you like to point to?
I'm gonna vote for yours, but I think it can tie into Noah's Foxman's. How you want to go, Noah? Not Foxman. Are you Foxman or
you
Noah?
can say whatever.
Sorry. Okay.
I'm flexible.
I don't want to dead name you.
No.
So yeah, I think we can, because this is such a this quarter thing is so internet driven, and even when it gets into the personal site estuary experience, it's still people coming from distant places and converging onto a spot and having this kind of somewhat artificially constructed event of 2 hours together talking about something via an imposed format, and then we all go back to our other lives for another 2 weeks or whatever. Anyway, so I think internet hygiene, wisdom, corner. What are we doing? Is this emerging church or is this deconstruction? I think that's all good. I don't know.
Okay. All right. Luke, what would you like to vote for?
Oh man, what are we? Are we 2 and 2? Kind of
2.
I'm interested in both, obviously, and I know Noah's going to be working a lot more on internet hygiene, which I really want to talk about. But I think just because I think it relates, and because it's valuable, and because I always like personal pitches, I'm going to go with Mark's personal pitch of wrestling with God, giving up. Because I actually think it is related, and then I'll make you decide.
Dirtbag. I was totally on the Skank train right from the start, but when Mark laid that personal, I'm a pastor. I'm a sucker for the personal. I'm always a sucker for the personal. You know, I can sit there and watch Bart Ehrman and be like, you know, you're a total dirtbag, just wanting everybody else to be a Christian so you can be an asshole. And but if I sat down in a room, I'd love you. I'm just a sucker for people, and so I gotta vote for Mark Parker's personal pitch. I can't do otherwise. Which puts us at a problem because we have
Did Mark? Oh no, Mark did vote.
Mark did vote. We have a 3-way tie. So I think maybe let's start with Skank, because the Skank Luke thing I think is tight, and I think Skank also got into the internet hygiene thing. But then let's keep it personal. So why don't we do that? So Skank, talk a little bit more about your about your pitch and actually, why don't you talk about your pitch and tell us why this is personal for you?
Why this is personal? Okay. So I think the core of the pitch that I'm thinking about is it's a question of like, how does different types of media affect us? And part of it is the things like, especially when you think of like powerful kind of like visual media. Like I use The Chosen example to use a very specific, very personal example for me. Okay. For the last probably like 2-3 years or whatever, while I'm at my church taking communion, the image of the end of Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade comes to my mind. So every time as I am partaking in the core Christian sacrament, I also have a movie clip playing in the back of my mind where I hear a Nazi say eternal life while I'm taking the cup. And I don't know what to do with that stacking of pop culture on top of liturgy. I don't know if that is something that I should be trying to exercise from my mind. But these things get in there and they get in deep, and you can't unsee things that you've seen.
So we're rolling, right?
Yep.
So this makes me think of, I made a video a long time ago about Tom Waits said in an interview, it's from the same interview where he says, there is no such thing as nonfiction. The people who know aren't talking, and the people who don't have a clue won't shut up. And but in that interview, he talks about folk and and folk religion and folk in general, which is really connected to pop culture and to ritual and to religion, I think. And just this last week, I watched Jack White was on with Conan O'Brien because they're buddies, and they were talking about Seven Nation Army and just how big that song has become. And he was asking Jack what he thinks about that, and he said it's almost gotten to the point now where Jack said it's become folk. He said people don't even know he wrote it anymore, which he says is great. He loves it. But I think that's how everything moves. Everything moves somewhat from certain media expressions, whether it's oral culture, to written culture, to what all these different media forms. And if it is substantive and is hitting and striking in something informative, it will eventually become folk, and no one will remember or largely they won't remember the other stuff, and it will just go on. So then that's connected to kind of what I was talking about a little bit, because and idolatry, I suppose, because maybe that's where the idolatry of the name fades away, when it becomes something so deep that it's folk religion, because it's just, I don't know, there isn't a lot of ego, cultural credibility attachment to it. It's just almost universally accepted when it's folk.
Universally Christian when it becomes folk? Is that what you said?
Well, I mean, if you want to Jesus smuggle, you can say universally Christian. I just mean universally accepted. Something that
okay, I heard
folk
Christian
religion is just, it almost transcends those ideological boundaries.
Well, the way you've used folk gets into Skank's pitch, because it's not footnoted. And when you use that illustration, I don't know the song, but if it's disconnected from its writer, it almost becomes folk. And to me, it almost becomes sort of like a mid-level spirit. So it's not an individual critter. It's not the top of the hierarchy, but it's a mid-level spirit. And people can't say, well, evidence for it or where it came from, but it's certainly governing large groups of people rather mindlessly. And, the idea behind Skank's idea from Postman is that once you have an idol in a temple, you can sort of draw lines to it and draw connections to it. But Israel's God is untethered, so that in Babylon, Ezekiel has a vision. Why is the God of Israel up here in Babylon? How can that be? when this is the God of the Babylonian space. I was listening, I haven't finished it yet, but I'm listening to Tom Holland and Mary Harrington, and Tom Holland is talking about Hadrian's Wall. And part of the function of what happens with the Roman Empire, at least for a time, is they build a wall to basically say, we're in, you're out, and we don't have to think about you. All we'll really do is kill you if you get in the way, because our thing is self-sufficient inside. A closed system, if we can go over to Daniel Gardner. So.
Well, and I think this is connected to Mark wrestling with God and atheism, and it's why I talk about Peter Rollins all the time. It's just like in the age of the death of God, we're still God haunted. It's that the veil is torn. It's just like, where are you going to go? I think that's a lot, and it's also that Nate Heil, when he was saying with Vervaeke, looking for the religion that's not a religion, he's like, well, that's already Christianity. Good luck. After Jesus, I believe this. After Jesus, there's two options. There's Christ and Antichrist, whatever you want to call it. And then, but you still have the idolatry of the name, where people will claim Christ and not act in accordance. And a lot of this is emergent TLC stuff. Like we've been dealing with this since day one. What do you mean by Christian? What do you mean by God? Tell me about the God you don't believe in. I probably don't believe in it either. Like, what are we even talking about here?
Well, and I go.
I was going to say, that's what I try to get at with talking about Christianity as a meta religion, like the sense in which it places itself higher up on the hierarchy and says, this is how all the spirits are supposed to engage with one another. Where like in traditional human religion, it's like, I found this spirit, I'm going to serve it, or I'm going to, I'm going to sacrifice to the farm god because the farm god's going to take care of me, or whatever our communal god is, or justice, or one of these things. And the God of Israel is the God of these things. Like, these are now kind of, whether or not they're doing the proper job, like they are under him on the hierarchy. And so it's us jumping up a level and saying, it doesn't really matter what these guys are doing in the middle. Like, I'm serving the higher one. And then the Bible does some weird stuff with like, well, now you will, don't you know, you will judge the angels. Like, there's this now new relationship of, wait, where are we on this hierarchy? We thought we were down here, but maybe we're a little higher than we thought we were.
Which is higher, Noah?
Which is higher? Humans are above the spirits.
Okay, I'm trying to understand
so
what you mean by
traditionally
higher
it's
and lower.
like God.
Good.
Well, I mean, I think a proper Christian theology is that you're moving your way up, like
in
closer
Christ.
closer to Christ. Like, if you're going to be the bride of Christ, like, there is the responsibility that's going to be there. But I think oftentimes we put ourselves under these spirits, under the nations. But I think a proper is this form, where it's like, this is people, this is the spirits. And the spirits are also, proper servants of the entire structure.
So I had this image where this weird situation where like we're the interns, but we're the interns to the CEO, which is going to cause a lot of jealousy amongst all of the middle managers who know they're going to get replaced by us eventually. But we're in this state of like, we're still learning, we're still developing into that role. And so there's this like Paul talks about, the transition from the old age to the new age.
What would this? How many of you guys are Christians of the flavor that see the revival of the state of Israel as a fulfillment of prophecy? Any hand raising there? I'm just curious. Because it's a setup. I know it's a popular idea within broader evangelicalism, but I don't know where we're at in this group.
Is Hezi in the comments before I say anything?
No, I'm just curious because, well, the setup is actually, you don't have to answer, but the setup for that's the setup for the question is the whole farm god business is transactional. You serve the god so that it serves you, right? What happens to your Christianity if it turns out that Netanyahu's way over his skis and this war ends up in the annihilation of the state of Israel, so we have no more state of Israel anymore? It's very possible. That rocked the world. That surely had an effect on faith the faith of the Judeans in 70 AD, and then ultimately after the Bar Kokhba rebellion failure. So, what would that do to us as Christians?
Well, it's helpful to back up a few generations and think about the beginning of the 20th century. You have the war to end all wars, which basically takes down a certain ancient regime. And of course, through the 20s and 30s, you really get into a weird modernity. And then you get this truly apocalyptic world war, which ends in the nuclear obliteration of 2 Japanese cities and the complete collapse of Nazi Germany and Japan. And then you have a Cold War. And at the same time, you get the creation of this nation state called Israel. You can really forgive American dispensationalists for losing their mind over that, because it is a tremendously big deal. Now, most of us here, I'm even a little older than Mark. So we were born in the 60s. We're not even quite real boomers even. We are a much more cynical breed that grows up with the fall of Saigon and Nixon's resignation. So Israel is to me, the Israel story is on a par with the Islamic story of the turn back towards religion, which to me is a story of the TLC and deconstruction. Because when I listen to Luke, when I listen to Ezra, Bart Ehrman sounds like a relic of the 20th century. And what I see happening in the corner is much more of a return to the dominant human project of religion.
I want to tie dispensationalism a little bit to what Luke talked about, because I think it's interesting, and it also kind of calls into question Luke's discussion of folk, because I think like dispensational belief that, you know, the restoration of Israel as a geopolitical entity is the fulfillment of prophecy, that is something that exists. I mean, sure, there are schools that teach it and whatnot, but for the most part, it exists as a kind of like folk theological meme that is in the minds of a lot of the people. And I think, Luke, the way that you describe the folk is something that's good, that's natural, that's the destination of all things. Is that good in this case? Is this true? Does the truth of this matter or not matter?
So it's almost as if Trip also, I'm feeling the estuary. You got to talk at some point. I'm feeling like the estuary managerial thing of I got to shut up long enough for you to talk. I was trying to connect because I popped out to see the comments for a while, and I saw Matt said we've already left the topic, but I don't think that's true, because there's something in the Israel thing where I think if you're either on the dispensationalist, it's a fulfillment of prophecy, or on the Zionist side of it, that's almost like it's either the true God or the idolatry of the ancient mindset, like the physical land, the actual people, the actual name of Israel matters. Like you can't just supersession it to like, oh, this is like now the church or something, and like the actual physical historic body doesn't matter, or it's been superseded or passed on or whatever. I don't know. I don't know if that's exactly there's probably levels to folk religion. I mean, I get what you're saying, that it's just like a meme, but to me, those kinds of dispensationalists are interacting with Israel in a way where it's an idol. Because like, to answer Mark, your question, maybe it'll get there this way, is like, whatever happens with Israel isn't going to shake my faith in the slightest. Like I've heard Jordan Daniel Wood has said this before, is like how Christianity is playing out in time, I have no idea. Like we're maybe still early church, you know, like I really have no idea how all that's going to play out. So is the current geopolitical nation state of Israel could disappear, And that doesn't mean that like a certain understanding of Israel because my understanding of Israel in the end times and like the tree that of Revelation that's for the blessing of all the nations, like the actual people group and every tongue and tribe, Israel is one of those that has a place of preeminence biblically. I mean, I don't think you can really get around that. Whether or not that's exactly the current nation state of Israel, I have no idea. It's beyond my pay grade.
Can we just double back like 5 minutes? I feel like this whole Israel topic is kind of sidetracking the conversation we were having. And we're trying to make it fit, and it's, I don't know, like, correct me if I'm wrong. If I'm talking out of turn, by all means, tell me. This feels like we're trying to fit this into the conversation, and we're struggling.
Why did you think it fit, Mark?
Well, folk religion. Noah brought up the farm god bit, and it's how transactional is your Christian faith? Do you need God to fulfill prophecy as you think it needs to be fulfilled? What would happen if something I mean, this is a foundational for a huge number of evangelical Christians, including the current ambassador to the state of Israel, including members of the current administration and past administrations in the United States. This idea that it's not folk religion in the peasant sense. It's a folk idea that if this is a folk premise, that the revival or the birth of the nation state of Israel in the modern sense is a fulfillment of biblical prophecy, and say current events result in the annihilation of said fulfillment, what does that do to your faith, be it folk or be it theologically grounded? I don't know. What are you going to do with 50 million evangelicals who suddenly find themselves completely unmoored? Their God has failed them.
Well,
you've already got a massive
people you're trying to talk to are not on the panel. Like,
no,
this,
but
you like.
But you want to serve them.
Yeah.
What does that bother you? One, it's still the idea of a religion. How? What is this? What is the?
I think that more dominant folk religion has been the post-war consensus, where in some ways the Jews were hallowed by the Holocaust, and that gripped America and the West because we no longer wanted the guilt of Germany on our consciences. So in that sense, we hallowed politically a certain group of people. But I think the post-war consensus and that religion, which is fading and which is going away as we watch, that world organizing perspective that has dominated in the West and has sort of continued to recede. The Democratic Party, that's sort of been the religion of the Democratic Party, and that's receding. And a big part of that was a dominant Protestant Western religion that was deeply secularized. And it could be that secularization is very similar to that folk dynamic that Luke is pointing out.
Well, why do people deconstruct? I mean, they could ask that. I mean, it's the what unmoors people from their faith.
Well, I mean, you asked the question about what are these particular people going to do when they discover their faith is transactional. And frankly, everybody's faith is transactional. Like that's the process of growing with God, is discovering your limits and God moving you past those transactional limits. Everybody starts off transactional, and Job's story comes for everybody. And you have to, like, you are like faced with a choice many, many times. Do you serve God for nothing, or do you serve God to get something?
Good, Trip. You haven't said anything yet.
Yeah, so I'm just trying to go back to the kind of the original prompt and kind of how we got to this particular topic. But I think that I think going back to the original reason that I wanted to vote for this was, I think you said, we got rid of the idols because now it takes God's not like in this like limited space, this thing that I can see and that kind of stuff that, whatever, he's everywhere. And then we go to the Babylon thing. Well, how can God be how can your God be here? He's not, this is Babylon. This is not Jerusalem or whatever. Okay. But to some extent, like I think that's always a question that we have. And in fact, the Jews had this question. So they said no idols, but they did have a tabernacle where God's presence was. That's a spatial, temporal location or whatever. And so we're going to use kind of like an Aristotelian term. Like I think that virtue for Aristotle was about just like getting rid of excess, right? So eat too little, that's a vice. Eat too much, that's a vice. It's somewhere in between. And so same thing with like folk versus specific in terms of religion. I think that like we have to find out, like you can go too far on the folk side and then it just becomes this nebulous kind of bunch of nonsense. And then you can go too far on the very specific side and you can err similarly on that side. And so I think really we're not really struggling with anything new. The Israelites were like, well, yeah, God is everywhere, but then also God is here. And as Christians, well, God is everywhere, but then also we take the Eucharist. God is right. He's here, right? And so we struggle with this, and this is constantly our battle in terms of that. And so in some sense, I don't think that we're asking a different question than we've ever asked, right? Like, where are we erring in terms of this? And so, like, for instance, like, Lord of the Rings or Chronicles of Narnia is very much a part of the way that I view my Christianity. It's a folk like fairy tale, right? But it is very much a way that I see the world. I see it through the Bible, and I see the Bible through it in large part, right? Is that bad? I don't think it's bad. I think that it can go too far, right? And then I think without it, it can be very empty. And I think like even if you go back to like the Greeks, so like we'll take the Odyssey or the Iliad, right? These were folk stories because like Homer, who was Homer? Like, who knows, right? Like, we don't know. But these stories of these Greek gods kind of shaped the Greek Hellenistic world in ways, and they behaved according to these stories. That where did they come from? Who wrote them? We don't really know. Are these gods real? Is this the god of Sparta? Is this the god of Athens or whatever? Like, but it was a folk story, but it became very particular at the same time and was located. This is the same thing that we're doing. And so I think that whenever we put too much like criticism, I think it's a right question. I think it's a wise question to ask, to what extent is our media influencing us negatively? But then also I think there can be too much of like almost a puritanical freak out about the fact that our media is influencing us in the same way. I wrote an article about The Chosen about this, is that even if I don't disagree with anything in particular in any particular episode of The Chosen, what is not being shown in The Chosen is a choice, right? And so like there are things that Jesus said and did that they chose not to introduce into the story. To what extent is that influencing my picture of Jesus? That's a valid question to ask, right? That doesn't mean The Chosen is wrong. And so I think it's more just like a constant, like, okay, to what extent is the folk like taking too much precedence versus like the particular, and vice versa. I guess that's kind of where I land on it.
Well, I think it's all that oftentimes we have a frame that we're seeing things through, and there's a conscious effort that needs to be taken to see things through other perspectives and understand that when you do that, then you begin to see how different your perspective is. Like, if you're seeing something through The Chosen or you're reading the text, like there's more texture to it. You're looking at it from more places. At risk of bringing up something that it sounds like we're trying to leave behind, like from my perspective, seeing like post-war consensus ways that we've been like living in the world, like I was always taught like the best looking ways to object to injustice is protest. Like, protest is the frame. Civil rights movement, feminist movement, all Vietnam protests. Like, this is the picture of what this looks like. Well, what is a protest but a begging to the gods of America to change something? And it's not the God of America, like uppercase G, like the government as God. Like, please change something. And so what do you do with that? Like that, like there's almost a point to be said, like, it frames, I don't know, the government as the deity. And you see this again repeated with, like, I don't know how many people remember this, but like Kony 2012, like that whole movement was a movement of young people who were in that tradition, who were saying, like, we see this injustice in Uganda, like, let's all like protest together. And the protest was to send troops into Uganda to take down this guy Kony. And it was based off of inaccurate information. And so there's several layers of, like, what do we do with that? Like, is this the correct frame all the time, or at all?
Rod in the comments has been hitting on pluralism, which is something that I think needs to be talked about with respect to when Mark talks about farm religion. I often call that common religion. It's deeply transactional. With the sacred social order, I get myself in alignment with the God in order that I can receive from the God. And that is directly engaged in the book of Job. And it's directly engaged in the crucifixion of Jesus. And then Ethan asked me in a comment, well, is common religion bad? No, it's not bad. Because Jesus doesn't move away from common religion, but Jesus engages it at a much deeper level. And that's now part of what happens with pluralism is that there are competing common religions at play. That's what pluralism is. Someone says, this is how I can get, this is what the good life is and how I can get it. And someone says, no, this is what the good life is and now I can get it. And part of what's interesting about the image on the screen and the internet, and now AI especially, is instead of the temple of Zeus or the temple of Artemis in Ephesus, now you can get your little silver statuettes that the artisans in Ephesus are selling that gets Paul into hot water, but they are in a sense replicas of the original. And now what we're having is just pluralism on a massive scale, claims on a massive scale that suggest even within Christianity, oh, orthodoxy has the stuff. And so, you know, we've seen Catholicism, we've seen all these elements of Protestantism, and Protestantism is almost everything not Catholic. That's sort of what Protestantism meant. But now there's a third, which is orthodoxy, and it's the orthodoxy as if it's one thing. And so there's a reason people are dysregulated, because we can't cope with that much confusion. And so then when we do, we tend to go back to reductions and we wall ourselves off and we limit. And you might say, well, that's a bad thing, but that's exactly what monasteries are.
I don't know. I look at it kind of like you get sick and your body, but you get a fever, right? Like it's a reaction to it. And so like you're gonna, like, if it's too chaotic, if it's too wild, if there's too much pluralism going on, like you're gonna have to start drawing boundaries, and that's a natural and good reaction. Now maybe your body overreacts and the fever was a little bit more than it needed to be or whatever it was, but it's still a necessary reaction. You cannot have this chaos keep reigning. Like that's not a good thing. And if it becomes inevitably too rigid, then walls start getting broken down too, right? That's the natural reaction to too much rigidity. So that just seems like a very natural, like, way that we have to deal with this, because no one has the perfect formula for how to navigate it, right? We're going to react one way or the other, and it's going to be building too big of a wall, and then that wall get broke down at some point, right? That's just, you know, call it the dialectic if you want, I guess.
Well, and when we had mass media, we had 3 networks and they all told us the same thing. And then cable came along And eventually we had the majority post-war consensus, and then Fox, which was a different thing. And then we had the split. And now you've got mass. I mean, even watching the war now, to anyone watching it, say, via YouTube versus via television, it's a different war. Wow, that's a big pause for this group.
Well, Skank is channeling Che Guevara over there, so I'm kind of. And you know what happens to people who challenge Che? You know, that always works so well. Anyway,
he wasn't very successful. The mythology around Guevara.
His meme is incredibly successful.
His meme is incredibly successful, but he's not alive to catch.
A lot of T-shirts have been sold by that meme.
A lot of T-shirts. That's right.
That's the long game here, trying to get on the T-shirt grift.
Get the cheese, yeah, you got it. Well, see, this for me, my retreat is to Catholicism. I mean, I don't see any other. I can't tell you what I really think about Catholicism without offending all my Protestant friends. And that makes me sad. But on the other hand, I don't know. Because we can't have an honest discussion about it with possibly breaking up friendships or ruining a live stream or something.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think in some ways that's sort of what the corner is for. And partly why it's the reason you talk to a therapist who lives in a box and can't tell your secrets is isolation from the governing relationships that really impact your life. And in that sense, the corner is similar, because you can be angry at Mark D. Parker or Jacob Federecci or Luke Thompson, and your wife doesn't care because she's not going to watch any of them on YouTube.
God help me if she does join the corner. I don't have to leave.
but
so because if we go, it's like so much of this discussion is driven by our Protestant experience. I don't know if we quite have the same discussion. Can you imagine a group of Catholic theologians having quite this discussion in this way? Now, they've had their crises, but would they have this discussion in this way?
I don't know. I mean, and when you say Catholic theologians, my mind
educated.
goes like this, because when you look at the major voices of Catholic theology over the last 60 years, it's like, wow. Because on just even in biblical studies, I can look at just the Catholic commentators on my shelf, and they are all over the map. Now, Bishop Barron might lean into YouTube land and say, I speak for the church because I'm a bishop, and fair
he's
enough.
One tiny little voice, yeah.
That's right, and especially in terms of Catholic theology. And one of the main elements of Catholic presence we've seen in the corner has tended to be the pushback against Vatican II. And it was enlightening when I read about Vatican I. So it's like, oh, wow, 19th century Catholicism, that was a really interesting conversation, when here we're talking about Christian nationalism in the United States. And then you read about the rise of fascism. And then, Catholic basically backs fascism in the Second World War until they realize that Hitler is coming with the package. And then they have a big problem in Germany. And then they lose the war. And so finally, by the 1960s, they have to say, democracy? Yeah, that's our horse now. When you should have heard what they said about democracy in the 19th century.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So, and again, we're back to pluralism. Which Catholicism? Spanish, French, Italian, Latin American? Okay, you've got a pope there, but so and
what's your relationship to the church? Is the question I guess I
there
have.
you go. And so then we have, back to Skank's pitch, we have an invisible church that is, it's all over the place.
Well, it's kind of both, right? Because that's the whole thing. Is it like, where is it confined to one particular thing? Is it in the temple? Is it in, the Holy of Holies?
Or is it between my ears?
Or is it not now? Or is it out? It's part of what we wrestle with in the corner of the God of your own understanding. It's part of what I wrestle with orthodoxy. I mean, we were talking about this in some of the chat, or even, so there's two things. When Kale was talking about Peugeot, he said that the way that they talked about postmodernism was great, because also someone needs to mute. Talking about internet hygiene. Is that you, Trip? Can I hear your kids in the background?
Oh yeah, maybe 1 second.
If you're not talking, maybe mute. There we go. But I've realized this Lent. Here we go. See, I will piss off all the folk traditionalists and orthodoxy. I've realized just how Protestant I am this Lenten period, because I don't feel like doing all the stuff. I don't feel like going to all the services. I mean, part of this is the authenticity thing. And if what orthodoxy really is not just an adherence to it as the best confessional theology, which is how I got there, by the way, and it really is just living into the rituals in an embodied way, I'm not doing that super well. So then what does that make me? And it's not that I don't have opinions, again, in the different media, modern, postmodern age that we're in, about the abstracted ideas. Like, I have convictions about those. I talk to Sam and Trip and you guys about them all the time. But like, so I think we're in this age where we're simultaneously wrestling with the ideas in abstract ways, and then also, when that gets too crazy, we resort back to more restorationist, isolated folk religion tropes, which, Mark, I mean, it seems like, I don't even think this is me like calling you out or something. That's what you're seeking to find in Catholicism. Is like, I don't know what to think about all this. Just give me the answers. But the problem is like, you can't ever get away from the person. Like, that's a choice. You can't ever get away from your choice in that. And so you're either saying, I don't know what I think about all these things, so I'll just let the church decide. Guess what? You're still caught. Wherever you go, you're still there.
That's very Sartrean, that conclusion you've drawn from my decision. So, I mean, I would say that, yes, at one level, I find a lot of the speculative position taking that happens within Protestant Christianity to be very individualized and therefore lacking any meaningful authority. So on many of these points, I can just defer to the magisterium and say, you guys take care of it. That's what you're paid to handle. On the other hand, I can, as I've pointed out in other places, I can't get away from this idea that I find in Joan of Arc said, that the church and Christ are one thing, and it's best not to confuse them. And it turns out this is in paragraph 795 of the Catechism. The church and Christ is the total Christ, and essentially they are merged. You have if you aren't. This is why I'm not the Christian. I can't. I'm not going Bart Ehrman's direction. I'm not going to become a Christian atheist, because I do believe I need to be saved, and the way to salvation is through Christ. But what if Christ and the church are one thing? Then I must find myself reconciled to his church. Now, if his church is some invisible blob that I can't, locate, how do I reconcile myself with that?
So, like, I agree. We were talking about this in a group chat earlier today. On some degree, and I know Tripp thinks this way. In some ways, I agree with you. Like the primacy of the See of Rome and first among equals, and like I agree with all that. But like the reconciliation of Catholicism and Eastern Orthodoxy and Oriental Orthodoxy, like in the eschaton, I think that's what's going to happen. I think Christ and the church, his bride, which I think this comes out like they are at one, but the church, Christ and his bride are different things, but they are at one. They need to be united, and we are in the process of them. They are united in like its fullness, in like Kairos, like it's happened, it is finished, but we're working that out. And so
of course we're working it out, but it isn't. We see, not all choices are equal. That's why I called your point Sartrean. It's existentialist. It's that if not choosing is still a choice, that you still have to choose. That's all existentialist. That's existentialism. That's Sartre. There is in a sense a singular choice, and you did touch upon it earlier. There is that one choice where you must be reconciled to God through Christ, and then how do I do that? This goes back to Rod's point about discuss, and then was it something like more and more discussion leading to unbelief? It's pretty far up in the chat, but I don't think all choices are equal. While we are working things out, I think this problem of alienation from the church that Christians have engaged in over centuries now leads us to this state of confusion. At least, and
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, this is me. Yeah.
Well, I mean, a consistent feature of stories of deconstruction, not just our contemporary moment, but throughout the centuries, has been reckoning with the fact that the visible church does not measure up to the character and witness of Christ, and that creating a crisis of the fact that, like, if the only thing I visibly have access to is the church, and I see a giant mixed bag at times, like that creates the crisis of deconstruction. It's the fact that the church is not today what it will be in the eschaton, and that's true of all stripes and shapes of it.
What do we mean? What do you guys mean when you say the word eschaton? What are you thinking when you tell me in the eschaton? I know the definition, but tell me what's in your head.
Like, that's the last things: new heavens,
new earth.
Okay.
I think there's also a piece
up and.
I think there's also a piece too when Mark, when you were mentioning like these like Catholic theologians, like what would they talk about? It was like, again, we asked the question, which Catholic theologians? Because I think about like Jan Hus would have thought of himself as a Catholic, like to the very end. And
Calvin and Luther too.
Yeah. But I think Jan Hus, for specifically because he didn't even try to lead like a revolution against. It was more just, I'm trying to say how important it is to have both the body and the blood for all believers. And so there's this idea of like, you know, like I would say he's a Catholic theologian who's doing work. And even like 2 of the last 4 popes have expressed great sadness that it ended the way it did with him. Saying they probably shouldn't have burned him to the stake. And so there's like, you know, like, what do we mean by Catholic thinkers? Or like this has been the tough part about talking with my Catholic friends, because I lived with them for, I lived in a Catholic like men's house at the university for 2 years. And there's this sense in which when they talk to everyone else, it's very much, we're all on the same page. We all believe the same thing. We are completely uniform. But I'm like, I'm living with you. I hear the conversations you have, and you guys argue about everything. And so it's like as much as we can say we are on the same page for all these things, like you can't ever get like on the same page with everything. Like there is a point where there has to be some level of disagreement or mysticism about like, we are still going to be one body, even though we look so different.
Well, and this gets into the idolatry of the name. We're all Catholic, and so we're all the same. Okay. All right. Sure.
Has anyone ever read Jesuit theology, like compared to like what Ratzinger was writing? I'm sorry, like this is not like they're not the same. And I think that's going back to kind of like what we were talking about with post-war consensus and everything else. At some point, I think we put together this picture of a past that was more uniform than it ever was. We were never in complete agreement. Like this idea that like the church was ever like unified in the way that like we tell this story, that was never true. Like they were always fighting. Like before Luther ever came around, the Eastern bishops and the Western bishops were fighting about things. Like this is not new. And so I think sometimes our deconstruction is just we paint this picture of the way things used to be. We get disillusioned because we look around and be like, well, that's not how things are now. So it must all be fake, and I need to walk away from it. And I've got news. That's never been the case. It has never been the case that we've been even close to as unified as some of like the pop Catholic apologists will say on YouTube and be like, no, the Catholic Church is one. We're in lockstep about this. No, you're not. You're not today. You never have been. That's always been a lie. And that's okay. I'm not saying that's not a criticism of them, because Protestants, Anglicans, Orthodox, we're all doing this, like, but this is nothing new under the sun here, guys. I don't know why we're like, I feel like to some extent, it's more like we had this like picture of, I mean, to change, this is just an analogy. I don't want to go down this rabbit hole, but we had this picture of like public health officials being beyond political influence, and like we had like we can just trust them and everything, and then that gets shattered, and now it's like we can't trust anything that they say about anything, and we've gone completely the other way about it. And I feel like sometimes our deconstruction stories sound a little bit to me like that, where you had this picture of a level of authority and unanimity that was never there, that was always fictional. It got obviously shattered, and maybe media, the internet, and everything else just makes it more easy for us to see like the obvious fractures where we could kind of pretend that we were all on the same page before. And I think that's all that a lot of the deconstruction stories I see is just that. It's like a disillusionment about a world that never existed. It never existed within the church, and it never will.
Maybe that's what new media does, is it allows us to die to our collective idolatry of the emergent forms. There are the emergent images that we have that dominate any particular media.
Well, and that's, I think, the point I was trying to get at with the protests bit, that like we have this frame of what protest is, and then now that we have the tools that we have, we can see like what we're actually doing with this. And building off too, like the public health angle. Like my wife is like she has a degree in public health, and so she did all the readings and everything. And basically the curriculum is like, say what you have to say to get the funding you need to be able to do the work. And if that means like, you know, basically lying through your teeth, just do it. Like that's what you need to do. And that's been the history of public health, and that's been the way it's gone. And we're going to present a face to everybody else that like this is the kind of work we do. If you have to lie about how much this disease is affecting people, like the people who you're trying to get the funding from, say it. Like that's what you need to do. And that's been the history of the thing. And then like that's just been the way that it's gone. And so now that, you know, we have the internet, we have more communication about this. Now that like everybody kind of knows what the Tuskegee trials are and all these pieces, like there's not a way around it. Like we all are aware.
And maybe this is why I like the corner so much and the extreme pluralism that's here, because like, you know, the crowd is where man goes to forget himself or to lose his conscience. Like that's the thing. You outsource all your stuff to the group, which to me is often a form of lying to yourself about what you really think. And there's some sense of like group security in that. It's like the old school Jordan Peterson zebra with like the orange stripe on him, like he's going to get picked off by predators. And so we have this evolutionary sense where like we have to conform for safety. Being the weirdo that I am, I've never felt that way. Everybody starts thinking the same thing. I want out immediately. I want everybody to think things differently than me, because then I think you're not lying.
Well, I think that
I just was pointing Rod's latest comment, Paul. You might be interested in if you haven't seen it. It's
the one about Foxman, or the one before.
If no one can agree, that's it.
if no one can agree, isn't historical biblical scholarship like that of Bar Ehrman and James Tabor a useful area of inquiry to fully understand the origins of the history of Christian movement? What's interesting, though, oh, go ahead, Skank,
Yeah.
because Skank
I
also
say-
has a seminary degree, and Tripp
I
was
say
a
the other
student
thing.
of his.
Okay, here's the other thing is like, especially if you're coming at it from the ground, to say that nobody agrees about anything, that's just not true. The problem is you're dealing with cross tradition talk. There is like substantial agreement that coalesces around certain traditions that are relatively coherent. Like people talk about there are 30,000 denominations. No, there are not. There's like a dozen, and then 29,000 Baptist churches. But that's again, like speaking as a Baptist, that's just the nature of it. And we are responding, like the Baptist tradition responds to certain problems in a top-down form of unity that we have seen as something that leads to corruption of the church at the local level. And so we are bottom-up people first and foremost, and we suffer for our bottom-up convictions, frankly. We have chosen that circus and those monkeys.
Okay, along those lines, though, I did a search. I just not now, but earlier this morning, and it was I just wanted to know how many Protestant churches have maintained their institutional integrity since their beginning. Okay.
What do you mean by institutional integrity?
That is, they're still the same organization they were 500 years ago.
The world has dramatically changed in 500 years.
See, the thing is the difference.
I use the term tradition, not institution, intentionally, because traditions develop over time because they are moving through time.
What makes a tradition? 40 years, 20 years, 10 years, 100 years?
2 Christmases in the eyes of a child.
I would say a tradition is a body that is united in action. This is belief. Act as if. This is why we have the Jordan Peterson. I'm not going to use your words. It's people who act together, who do things together. It's a body. That's a tradition.
But see,
I mean, to my mind, and that's
there are buildings you can go to, libraries that have existed for hundreds, centuries and centuries that that are Catholic. You can still go and say, these are the Catholic church's buildings. These are the Catholic church's libraries. These are these institutions. We have various orders and whatnot that you can place them on a map.
That seems weak.
In Protestant, hold on, just 1 second. Just within Protestantism, I came up with 4. 4. We've got the Moravians, which preceded, as well as the Waldensians. Waldensian Evangelical Church. I've heard of the Waldensians. I don't really know much about them. They also precede somewhat. The Mennonites and the Reformed Church of Hungary. None of which you would think of as mainstream Protestant. The Protestantism, interestingly enough, it survives by splitting and it's eating itself. It comes, it goes, it changes shape. But you can't locate it. Whereas the institutional church, when you look at you can say to the Catholic Church, that's where it is.
Where?
You can point to it. It's centered in the Vatican. It's been there before they have buildings that have been there before since Rome. It's been there
before St. Peter's Basilica. Was there a Catholic church?
What's the question?
Before St. Peter's Basilica was built, was there a Catholic church? Before the church went to Rome, was there a Catholic church?
There was a
before
what's the point?
Apostles went to Rome. Was there an apostolic succession Roman Catholic Church? That would be the Roman Catholic Church.
Well, the apostolic succession presumably began with the apostles.
That's right. So when Peter went there, he went.
And Peter and Paul go to Rome, and they die.
At the Vatican, Peter went there. That's when the Roman Catholic Church started.
The Roman Catholic Church is the Roman Catholic Church. You're getting lost in the weeds here. My point is that there is one church.
No. See, Mark, you're criticizing the weeds of the other denominations when I'm saying I can keep pulling at that thread of the Roman Catholic Church too, and you would say, yeah, okay.
Okay, but it's the difference is 2,000 years. The difference is 2,000 years versus 500 or 150 or 10.
And I'm saying that would be, you're disputing the claims of what Protestants would believe. Calvin and Luther did not think that we were starting a new church. Like that's not the claim. So like
while he called the Pope the Antichrist and and every profanity under the sun.
3 popes, Mark. Before Luther. We don't have to get into this, but like, if you want to pull up the weeds of the other denominations and traditions, you're free to. I'm just saying that's a universal acid.
But what's a tradition if it doesn't last, is my point.
Well, I think there's an important piece here, and it's the meme that goes on where you have the modern anti-fascist movement says that we are part of this long-standing American tradition of being anti-fascist. And then the joke is that you teleport someone who would consider themselves anti-fascist from World War II, and they'd be like, we are not on the side of these people. Like the thing is, like, things change over time. And like it's a ship of Theseus. Like you're constantly taking out parts and you're putting new parts in. And like there's going to be development over time. And like I think the Orthodox, work on trying to be as like consistent as possible. I think the Catholics do a good job of trying to adapt relatively quickly, but then also try to hold on to tradition. And then the Protestants are constantly adapting. And that's been their take. Basically, just we're going to go as fast as possible to adapt. And each of those approaches have their positives and negatives. But
why are you working so hard to stay separate from the church? Why are you working? Why aren't Christians working harder to find ways to unite as opposed to?
Protestants are quicker to embrace Catholics as Christians than the other way around.
In what sense?
In almost every sense. Luther,
they can take communion with us, and we can't take communion with them.
Yeah,
because what do you think about the Eucharist?
It's Christ's body.
And and can you take that in good conscience?
Well, Mark, if I believed in transubstantiation, they still wouldn't let me take it.
Well, yeah, you'd have to follow the procedure to join the body, and it's. But that's a process that's as old as the DDK. Right?
But even built into the question, like even the way you phrased it, Mark, was why are Protestants so reluctant to unify with the church? Like built into the way that you even phrased that question is the Roman Catholic Church is the church, and you guys are outside of it. And it's so like I'm saying, built into the question is the answer.
There were no Protestants until they had a rebellion.
Protestant is a label, and it's a label. Like Calvin and Luther did not think that they were building a new church. That was not their purpose. That was not what they.
No, they felt that they were restoring the old church that had been lost. Correct?
Another element of this is also, if you listen to someone like Richard Rowland talk about church in England in the 10th century, 9th century, says it all looked Orthodox. One of the things that develops in the modern period are not only the imagination of a particular form, but also the capacity of those groups to install discipline below. One of the real questions is discipline a mark of the true church? Calvin says yes. One looks at the Roman Catholic Church now, and it's tough to know, because you have the question of how much is this? And then again, my conversation with Nathan Jacobs was just fascinating, because he's like, council, heresy trial, orthodoxy, it just sort of lets it ride and doesn't push too hard unless the others die out. Now that's kind of difficult, though, when you look at what's happening between Ukraine and Russia, or autocephalous status, and the fact that in America, if you say, I'm going to the Orthodox Church, you have to ask what kind. Whereas to your point, Mark, I'm going to the Catholic Church, it's like, oh, unless you're Mel Gibson, because then there's the true Catholic Church. And there's plenty of them around too.
But it's also just ethnic. I mean, Orthodoxy would say they're all the same thing. It's just ethnic distinctions.
Just ethnic. In America.
I mean, that's part of, but I mean, that's just part of the history of how it evolved and worked out, I mean, it's kind of unavoidable.
And
there's less top down. But there's less top-down discipline across these ethnic churches, right, than what you could have theoretically in the Roman Catholic Church, right? So like there's only like one patriarch and be like, I'm like going to speak ex cathedra and dictate this to the Ukraine, and that would work. That wouldn't happen in the Orthodox Church. So that's what I'm saying. So that's what like Paul's saying, is that they're like this top-down imposition is what the Roman Catholic Church, like in theory, has that the Orthodox Church does not. You have it kind of locally within like these states under this patriarch, but like not cross states.
It's all under the bishops because it's biblical.
Well, and part of the
Well, the Bishop of
difficulty
Rome.
is the resolution that when we look into the past, we tend to just see what's visible in history. It tends to be buildings, institutions, writings, some of these kinds of things. You know, a point that I make commonly to people is go into any church, anywhere, and just start talking and listening carefully to people. You'll certainly see patterns in churches with respect to confessionality, doctrine, tradition. You'll see those patterns. They do emerge, but the particularities and the idiosyncrasies of any given person who goes to those churches, it's wildly broad. And that's just a fact of human life. And part of what's happening with social media and the internet is just that more and more and more is visible. And Mark, I think, you know, part of what makes your story so interesting, and anybody who hasn't listened to Mark's Self-Rando, which is on his channel, should really listen to his story, because in many ways, Mark, your story is a very much a story of American Christianity. The Stone Campbell, entry of Buddhism. You're part of why you belong in the corner, and why, you know, I'm so glad you're here in the corner, is because you are in one person working through what I see many, many, many other people in the process of struggling with. I mean, Rod in the comments said 8 years ago I came because I heard something in Jordan Peterson, and I thought maybe the religion that I saw in my family that I rejected, maybe I should give it another look. And he says 8 years into the TLC, maybe I'm less likely to join a church than I was 8 years ago. Well, that's partly because we've expanded his knowledge, but also we've also asked some very uncomfortable questions about, well, okay, so you don't go to church, that procedurally, but what exactly is your religion? What is your secular social order or your sacred social order that's actually functioning? And what are the bodies that you're actually participating in?
Well, and that's what's hard about all this, back to the idolatry of a name. And I mean, you could talk about intersectionality, and no name is a monolith. I mean, that's kind of what we're getting at. You know, the weeds grow up with the wheat. And so in any group, you're always going to have to deal with the lived reality that in any group, whether it's Catholic or Orthodox or Protestant, within any of those labels, you're going to find real douchebags, really bad people. Are they okay simply because you like the label? And then you'll find atheists or the good Buddhist who acts really well. Which one looks more like Christ? Buddha. You know this, Mark. Like, I like your Christ, I don't like your Christians. So like,
it was Gandhi, not Buddha, but anyway.
Gandhi, doesn't matter. It's just a name. So like, you know what I mean. I'm vacuuming the driveway. But it's like, that's something you have to deal with. So like, I have convictions that I talk to Sam all the time about orthodoxy. This is why I like to talk. It's one of the reasons I like to talk about the Trinity and Christology so much, is because I think it gets at a spirit behind it. It's not that I don't have convictions about the labels, but I don't want to get caught up on the labels because I don't even know how Sam and I disagree that much. But I really like talking to him, and I've learned a lot about the Trinity, and that's why I like pluralism. I hate the impulse, to be honest, to like cloister yourselves behind a name and think that you've found safety. You haven't. Wait for that to go to hell.
What if, though, if the Luke, see, I love Sam, and I think I respect Sam's scholarship. He may have read history correctly, all of that. His take on God may actually be the right one. I don't know. But what is it in the impulse that why choose why choose the fight over a point that you really ultimately can't decide? Why not just accept submission as part of the path? It's this drive to, the church is Trinitarian. It's at least, I mean, even Protestant and Catholic and Orthodox. The church is Trinitarian. Why not just be wrong? Why not just accept the label as wrong and move forward and be in fellowship with the body of Christ? Why must I rattle the saber and pound the pulpit and drive home a point again and again and again that you're wrong, the Trinitarian, the history of the church is wrong, all this other thing, you got it all wrong, that the creeds are wrong? Why not just submit yourself to the church?
Well,
that's the exercise. That's and to me, it seems this is when I read Paul in 1 Corinthians. This is the conclusion I came to. It's not that I agree with the Catholics on everything. I probably don't. I know I don't. But the point is to not break fellowship.
Well, and I think my answer to that, I'll try to be brief, is that I think Sam and I serve different mid-level spirits. I'm choosing to submit to persons, even when I don't understand it, even though I have ideas about doctrines of different things. Sam is ultimately, and all this is connected to his father. The reason PVK is where he is connected to his father and his grandpa. You can't divorce yourself from any of those things. I don't ultimately submit to my interpretation of texts. I don't think authority is found in text per se. I think it's found in people, bishops in particular, and an inheritance of a body. That's my conviction. Sam apparently doesn't believe that.
Well, I think also you have to look at tradition itself. Like, I could easily see somebody saying to Maximus the Confessor, like, why don't you just give this up? Like, you're causing a lot of trouble for yourself. Why are you sticking to this doctrine that seems so important to you? Everybody disagrees with you around you. So what's that about? And he did it enough to get his tongue cut out, and he got disconnected from the body of Christ. Like, but now he's considered a saint. So like, what is it? Is it like the community most important, or is it,
But he stayed in the church.
In prison, yeah.
Well,
yeah. I'm gonna shift things around just because I think it might be helpful. We talked about personal stuff, and so I can be personal about my journey around Catholicism real fast, and I can let it go, and we can go wherever we want to go. I got like really into Catholicism, watching all the apologetics and stuff around the end of college for me. I was hanging out with some of the guys at the Newman Center at my local university. We were having a good time. One of the guys there I got along with really well. We talked about Dostoevsky all the time, and it was a really good experience. One of those like really close friendships that like it just comes out of nowhere. Like it's just really good. Pretty soon after that, he became like a student minister, or like I think he was actually just a minister. Like he was being paid. So we were having more conversations, and then I got kind of invited to have regular conversations with him at his office. And then it started to the frame started to shift. And it was like, oh, this is conversion talk. Like this is him trying to get me into a box. And there were a few things where he would say really nasty stuff about my tradition, about Pentecostalism, about how like all these things that like your family, like I don't know if he meant this exactly, but how it read to me was your family like is going down a path where they're being possessed by demons and stuff. And like I can't handle that. So I was like, I'm pushing back, but I'm like, I'm not pushing back hard. I'm like, yeah, no, I don't know if I completely agree with that. And it was really troubling for me. Immediately after that conversation, he stopped talking to me. Like we would still hang out maybe once in a while in group functions, but he never reached out to me ever again. And and I don't talk to him anymore. Like I tried a couple times, and he just, is not interested. Like that was a conversion relationship, I realized in retrospect. Like his goal was to get somebody else in the church. And so that was really difficult for me. And then I also see my friends who I've connected with still in Catholicism. And they feel like they are being betrayed by their own church. Like they are people who love the Latin liturgy, and it's something they like have a deep heart for. And they see like the amounts of young people who are being pulled into this and being able to have this experience with the Eucharist. And it feels like it's being cracked down on. And so they feel like they are being attacked by their own church, and it's actually causing a crisis of faith to them too, like on the individual level, like behind the scenes. I'm talking to people. And so I see all this, and it's just heartbreaking. And I don't know, this is just my personal experience.
It's interesting the way individuals in our relationships epitomize traditions and institutions. I've been making shorts out of my initial conversation with Richard Rowland, and part of what's fun about making the shorts is it forces me to revisit those videos and revisit those conversations and remember. And for him, a big piece of his journey from sort of homeschooled, deeply Baptist, evangelical fundamentalism into orthodoxy was a relationship with an individual, a couple in particular. And Noah, yours is sort of the opposite. And this is so key. And part of what institutions, I think, especially in an era of an industrial mentality, we are trying to, church programming tends to want to produce widgets. And part of what's so interesting to me about Christianity is that the saints are so strange and diverse. And so, intuitively, in reading a number of the people in the comments, Rod, Sunrise, strangely spelled, people, I loved where Ezra's voice at the end of our rando when we talked, where, love, this agapic love is what we as human beings, we can be fooled and betrayed by it, but there's something deeply within us that says human beings are the priority, and love your enemy all the way up to and including your enemy. And so it's amazing when Bart Ehrman comes on, and for all of Bart's, the things that make Bart Ehrman, he focuses on this and says, this is the thing that Jesus brings. And churches betray Jesus often. But of course, it's also complex, because whether or not I think someone is loving me well, that's also impacted by what I think love requires of them towards me. And I may be deeply wrong about that. Mm-hmm. So I think often when people say, well, why should I go to church? I would say you need to have a church so that you can love other people. Recently, it came up that that Socrates' wife was kind of a pain in the neck, and people asked Socrates, why would you marry such a terrible woman? And the answer is something like, because she helps me tolerate the rest of humanity. If I can tolerate her, I can tolerate others. But I think that gets down to this question of love, and what Noah saw in this relationship was love. And then he figured out that, no, wait a minute, this minister is a prostitute. He's loving me for pay. He's going through procedural loving for pay. And part of what's interesting about Jesus is that there's always a tension with Jesus with respect to the institutions. Now, America comes along and says, no institutions, very rebel, anti-institutional culture. And it's like, that's not the way either. but Jesus, with respect to institutions, and this goes all the way through the Bible, Naaman comes to Elisha, and after he's been healed, this great transaction, he wants to pay, and Elisha's like, no. Gehazi goes and gets it and gets something he wasn't looking forward to. And then Naaman is like, I want to be faithful to your God, Elisha, but I serve at the pleasure of a pagan. If I go into the temple of my master and must bow the knee with him, will your God punish me? And Elisha says, go in peace. So this is a God who understands. And
well, it seems like, but we're all kind of struggling with. I mean, we're just living with the contradictions and of two different things. For one sense, there is a certain comfort in having an institution that has survived a period of time, that can kind of say, hey, you're not experiencing anything that's new. We've thought about this before. Here, like that. There's a comfort level there, right? And then also there's a comfort level in knowing your local priest and knowing that they really actually care about you. And you can survive maybe with one or the other. Like, I'm kind of skeptical about my institution, but I love my priest. Or I'm not really crazy about my priest, but I really actually respect my institution. So but I think you can go too far in one. So if you put too much faith in just your priest, and then that guy lets you down because he was just befriending you because he wanted to convert you or whatever, and he was doing it for pay, or there's a scandal in your church and now I no longer believe in institutional religion and that kind of stuff, like both of these can lead you away from the church. And so I think that but we need both in the same way that Jesus is the logos, the unifying principle throughout all creation by which everything exists. And also he was a person, right? And what do we do with that universal and that particular, the institution and the personal people inside that institution? And it's like, sometimes I feel like we're arguing about, no, this is the only one that matters. And you're like, well, no, all these matter. And we're all struggling with, to what extent am I placing too much faith in one versus the other? And that's why sometimes I think it's comforting for people to say, no, I'm going to be Roman Catholic because it's been around for this long. I need something that anchors me, and this helps me. And sometimes it's like, well, but I actually need someone to care about me, right? That I know that I can meet with and have coffee and that kind of thing. And then also, then there's the submission. I think there's a certain amount of submission that is, yes, it's good for you to submit despite your disagreements with, the church. Should submit to the church. Okay, great. There has to be a limit to that too, right? Submit to everything that your institution or your priest or something might say. No, not even the saints would say that. And we have many, examples of them not saying it. And so I think in some sense, I think some of the problem is we have a hard time affirming both of those things, all those sort of things at the same time. Institutions matter, so do people. Traditions matter, so do, all these things matter. And we're all just trying to find a balancing act. And we're all constantly frustrated that, we know we don't have it right, but also we look at someone else and you're like, well, you don't have it right either. And then we get on YouTube and argue about it.
But you might have it a little better than I do, so I'm going to at least listen to you for this.
Right. Yeah, right.
Was Maximus, and I don't know the history of this. I mean, I know the vague details, but I don't know the deep story. Was Maximus the Confessor made a saint because he was right, or because he did endure until they cut off his hands and his tongue?
Yes.
That enduring factor, I'm guessing he needed to lose his hands and his tongue to reach that sainthood level. And that's the challenge for me. It's just like, how, there are limits. There are limits, but does that mean, at some point do I say, I'm done with the church? This is, I've reached my limit. I'm done. I'm done. I mean, I've had those moments where I want to just say, I'm done. It's back to the wrestling and waiting for the wound. I'm done. There's parts where I just want to, I'm done with you people. But then it's like, but then if I separate myself from you, I separate myself from Christ. And that's the thing so I keep enduring.
You know, I had this thought a few times as you've been talking, Mark. The phrase has come to me a few times as you were talking, not all who wander are lost. And then I just realized you have it as a poster behind you.
All right.
Which is great.
Let's have closing statements, and then I will drop the link. And first, let me thank all of you for on short notice volunteering to be part of this group and part of this discussion. I very much enjoyed it, and I enjoyed everybody's participation here. This is a really awesome group. So, last thoughts and after I drop the link, you're all welcome to leave if you need to, or when you want to, or what have you, and then I'll keep it running. Usually maybe till 1/2 hour, something like that. We'll see how it goes.
So my last thought, I was thinking about going and getting Martin Shaw's book, but he has a section there where he's talking about how there's spirits everywhere and the whole world being spiritual. And then the argument of like, well, if they're all there, why wouldn't God just tell us? Why wouldn't God just make everything clear? Which is I think it's applicable, and it's an obvious thing that atheists say all the time. And then the simple answer that he came to, or someone told him, he's like, well, because then you wouldn't need faith. If the whole point of this is faith and to wrestle with God and to struggle and to become perfected by what you suffer, then suffering isn't the problem. It's what we have to do. And part of that's the intellectual, theological, whatever. A lot of it, there's many different ways we suffer. And I think it's all fine. It's training.
I really think when we get to the level of discussion of like a tradition battling another tradition, that's really the sort of discussion that is frankly kind of above the pay grade of us as individuals. And so I try to tread in those, I try not to take those too seriously, because I'm not qualified enough to really, be a participant on the level of institution or tradition be tradition. And so I try and be very gentle and humble in these sorts of things. And I mean, when I got into grad school, one of my main approaches that I've really tried to embody is just started to play around with the question, what does it mean to responsibly change your mind? How do you appropriately admit that you're wrong and then find your way towards a truer, better path? Because it's really, really easy to do that in a reactive way as soon as you come up against something that you find intolerable on the path that you're on. But how do you how do you go about that process in a way that's actually seeking truth rather than just trying to appease the passions that are raging, and at times justifiably so? I've been given plenty of reasons to abandon the tradition I currently live in, and haven't found that to be necessary yet. But it's jumping traditions is just a really, really big thing. And I try and both analyze that very, very carefully while also recognizing that I know, I was placed here for, I was born where I was given the tradition, the heritage I have for a reason. And I feel like that's a path I need to play out before jumping to another ship. That's my personal approach to this whole intra-traditional discussions.
Just real quick, my parting thought would be, I had lunch recently with a friend from Estuary who was curious about the Buddhism background and pivoting to Catholicism. He's puzzled, and then he told me a story about his experience with church, and he had a horrific experience at a church where he was really getting into it, and then had just a horrible experience there that drove him away from the church. And I realized in retrospect with that conversation that, what I need is a place to point him to, because it's I don't, with other than say, well, just try a different church. I don't have that confidence. I would like to just say, you know what, that's some of these places are like that. They're unpredictable. They're very individualized. You may find beautiful people. You may find horrible people. You never know what you're going to find at some of these places. But here's the church. If you want to be a Christian, that's where you go be a Christian. And that's very appealing to me. And on the put a pin on that, I don't know if I proved the point that I can't bring up how I really feel about the Catholic Church or not. I said it without blowing up a group. Did I win the argument, Paul?
Yeah, I don't think you blew us up. I think we enjoyed it. Again, early on when I started the channel, I had this dilemma that, Rod basically said, Rod will be coming up in a minute. People are like, well, I want to go to church. Gosh, I just thought about what they were faced with. And so what I finally came down to was pick a friend who goes to church, but pick a friend who you admire, who you respect, who you want to be around more, and start with them. Now, it might be that you go with them for a little while and, you have to go somewhere else, but that's a good way to begin because it's a personal way to begin. And I think in America, the divisions between the churches are not exactly like we think they are. So start someplace where, again, if your friend likes it there and you respect your friend, that's a good place to begin. And because odds are you might get a good match. And it's interesting to me that we're having in the corner, we've long had the church conversation about matchmaking and the personal conversation about romantic matchmaking, both at the same time. Both of these are in crises, which, especially because in the past, you tended to find your spouse through your religious community. So, any other closing thoughts before I let in the others?
I guess my only closing thought is actually and maybe this is just very Protestant of me, I actually like the fact that we have so many different traditions that are suitably different, because I don't think that you're going to find one that's going to actually work. I think some people will find one tradition comforting and another one not comforting. And I think that it's actually very good that we have that ability to do it. And so far from like me wanting to push back on Catholics or Orthodox, I'm not from those traditions. I'm not Pentecostal or charismatic. I think it's very good that we have those churches. I think it's very, very good. And to whatever extent those people are being led to Christ, that is a very good thing. And so I actually find it very comforting. I would find it less comforting if I had to rely on an institution. If I thought that like the entirety of the church relied on an institution, that would actually worry me quite a bit. But that's not my belief, that there's an institution the same way that Microsoft is an institution that we have to rely on. I'm very, very grateful that I don't believe that to be the case.
Yeah, to me, the job of the church is to point us and connect us to Christ by faith. That's John Calvin's answer. So I'll just put the footnote in there. But that's the role of the church, to connect me to Christ. And Christ, to point to Luke, Christ is a person who is alive and with whom I can have a living relationship. And the church is part of that connection. And that doesn't mean that Christ is limited by the church. Christ sits.
But can a house divided against itself stand?
No, and all of our human houses fall. But that's why I need to be connected to Christ. And so I tell people, look for a church that connects you to Christ, because that's what this is about. That's, all right. Anything? Oh, go Noah, go ahead.
Yep. As one of the few Gen Z people here, thank you for letting me have a voice. I don't know. I think about, like, I feel like I've been there's two messages always being told to me as a young person. It's simultaneously distrust institutions, and at the same time trust the institutions that we developed, because we distrusted the institutions. And so it's simultaneously those two messages that are going back and forth over and over again. But I was struck by what Mark was saying at the end of his closing words of this idea of like, how do you trust the church when everything is kind of falling apart? Like, do you just leave? And I think about the end of Judges and this time when like everything is like the worst you can think of. It's a reenactment of Sodom and Gomorrah all over again. And it's like super obvious too. It's not even like there's nothing.
The end of the book of Judges, for those who don't know their Bible, that's what he's talking about. Go on.
And so you reach the end of it, and then the next piece is Ruth. And so you have this kind of large conflict that's like it shows the corruption on mass, and then you see this little moment of the faithfulness of two women and a man who is willing to be responsible and to love these women, and that's what brings the salvation of this people. And it's not anything to be done on the mass wars and the killing of these conquerors. It's the faithfulness of a few people that bring about children that lead to the line of Christ. So those are my thoughts.
All right, wonderful. Okay, thank you all. We have two have joined us. This is just old home day here in the TLC. So, Rod, you were first.
How about that? Can you hear me all right?
Yep.
Every time I do this, I think this is probably the last time.
It's like the mafia. Every time you leave, they keep pulling you back in.
Either because you guys kicked me out, or I can't get a foothold. I can't find something to talk about that's interesting to the rest of you. So thanks for indulging me. I felt like I was kind of salty in the chat, so I probably needed to show up and defend myself. And my usual 2:00 on Friday is canceled, so here I am. I actually, Paul, I liked your pitch because it's kind of like what I was saying in the chat, and I was glad to see you engage with Bart Ehrman, because I've been engaging with him this whole time. As I said, I probably listened about as much of him as I have of Jordan Peterson. And so he's not an asshole, Paul, whatever else you might think of him. Because you started off by saying he was.
I don't. That's not what my impression of him, but people who know him personally have said things to me.
Oh, well, that could be. No, fair enough. Fair. I do not know that. I've never met the man. And I have met almost all of you to at least shake your hand, and some of you I've spent real time together. So. And it's part of the reason why I'm here. But I guess the thing that I wanted to flesh out, if you guys were willing, was my own experience, right? Because I actually went back not too long ago and read the first email I ever sent to you, Paul. And it was kind of sweet, actually, because I'm very much in that mode where I'm investigating and I'm seeking, right? And you have all these Whitensville connections. Like, well, there's that was like serendipitous. Like, I'm gonna tune into that frequency. I'm gonna follow that thread, right? And I even asked you, like, are you aware of any pastors in the Nashville area that that maybe you don't want to introduce? Basically, implicitly, that are like you,
Yeah.
right? Because I liked what you were doing, right? You were engaging all the hard questions, and I liked you for all the same reasons we all do. And then I made the comment that. Not only my experiences here at the TLC, and if I'm not really careful, this could sound almost the opposite of what I'm trying to say, which is it could sound like a critique of either the TLC or its participants, and that's not my point. Right? It's almost exactly the opposite, actually, of my point, which is over the last 8 years, my inclination to somehow get involved with the church has gone basically to zero. It was low before, but it's basically zero now. And a lot of it has to do with, in a sense, I feel like I know too much. And I actually have people in my life, friends, people I know well. I have a sister-in-law who worked for a church, inside a church, and the stories she would tell were just horrific in terms of gossip and just like, right? and then people who, like, I have a friend who's an IT consultant specialist who does nothing but churches, and so he knows a lot about churches, right? And his comment is like, the more you know, the less the less favorably inclined you are. And so I just and that has been in the conversation today. I have a take on that. I said something about pluralism, like, well, if everybody is a Christian, well, then what is a Christian, right? So I'm mostly here to just defend my salty comments, but also I think it's a juicy topic. I think I would love to see the TLC chew on that a lot more than my sense is that this space has become increasingly religious, and I end up feeling like the guy that walks into a sports bar and sort of tells everybody, hey guys, it's all just a game. You all love football. What difference does it really make? Why are we talking about that? Right? Like, I don't want to be that guy, right? I understand that for many of you, this is just enjoyable to just knock around and talk about. And I get that, right? I'm sort of more looking, but what's the point? Is it true or not? Right? So anyway, I've said enough.
I'll respond a little bit. Like, I want to connect and talk. And no, I just want to like open up like a longer discussion some later time, Rod. Honestly,
sure.
Like you've been yapping about like Bart Ehrman for a bit, and
like,
some of us like, I'm just being friendly, down home, and colloquial here, man.
I mentioned it once.
Yeah. No, this is at least the third time I've seen you drop it. I just kind of like would love to hear some other time in some later in a longer format, just like what you think we're missing from, or what you're seeing there that we're missing out on.
Well, happily, Matt, happily.
Yeah.
The shorter version would be, I have heard what Paul just said from one other source too about like what he's like personally, and I can't vouch for that. And if that's true, well then the hell with it.
I don't care. That's not the same thing as your scholarly work. That's fine.
Right. And it seems like people are more comfortable with James Tabor, so him too, right? In other words, I find in the same way I love the history of the foundation of the American experiment. I love hearing about and reading about our founding fathers. And so history and the exploration of the origins of this country and the sort of ideals that embodied that are fascinating to me, right? So, and some of that can be deconstructive. Maybe Washington didn't actually chop down a cherry tree or whatever, right?
But things that are so powerful that they lend themselves to myth making at the same time.
Right. And I can accept it. And there's no, I was saying in my comment on Paul's homeroom, I told that little bit that Louis C.K. does. He's like, he's returning a rental car and he's late for his flight. So he just drops it off in front of the terminal and rushes in to catch the flight. And then once he gets there, he just calls him and said, hey, your car's in front of the terminal one. You can't do that. He's like, well, you want your car or not? Right. And then he's kind of doing this whole bit on like, do you want to live in the world where everybody just drops their car off wherever they feel like it? And, it is basically doing, it's actually a deep exploration there about, the sort of foundational questions of any kind of moral philosophy. Right. And so I don't find any inconsistency between saying this man, Jesus, launched a movement that changed the world in all the ways that it did, both good and bad, and hugely consequential, obviously. And I don't necessarily think he was born to a virgin. And I don't, clearly the Bible seems to think he had siblings. Like, so even if she was a virgin, she wasn't a perpetual virgin, right? Which I know is heretical to
Catholics owned.
Like I would not lose one wink of sleep about holding those two things in tension. It just wouldn't bother me at all. So anyway,
Rod, maybe you should be on the emerging tip. Maybe you should read Rob Bell's Velvet Elvis. It's like the primary illustration he uses in that is about like is faith.
Trampoline.
The trampoline, it's skank versus the brick wall. Is faith more like a trampoline or a brick wall? And you remove doctrines of which one he says is the virgin birth. And this is even part of my evolution. I never lost faith, but deconstruction is he used that illustration saying like if you remove the virgin birth, is it like a brick in the wall where you remove too many, the wall falls? Or is it like a spring on a trampoline where you can keep jumping? That's right. I don't know what I think about this. I keep jumping. The 2 days after I read that in the book, I heard an evangelical pastor say from the pulpit that Rob Bell doesn't think the virgin birth is important. And I said, that's not what he said at all, you lying bastard. Not at all. And so like all this stuff, part of why I love the TLC is like, we could talk about all this stuff. This is what pluralism is. I can have convictions and keep talking to people who disagree with me and not judge you, because that's not my job. I don't need to sell you on anything.
I'm going to make room for others, but my core point was the effect on me of being part of this whole thing. I mean, it was, I don't know, 4 or 5 years before I ever showed my face around here, but you know, I kept talking to Paul privately. That was my motivation. It's like, I liked Paul, you know, a friendship of sorts formed, and we just kept talking, right? And eventually I got more involved, and here I am, right? I mean, that's probably how you Christians work anyway, right? Just keep coaxing them in, right? So here I am participating, but mostly just out of interest in the personal side of things, right? And so in a sense, that's what I'm saying. Like, I keep waiting for the point where it's like, Rod, it's great, but we actually like to talk about football around here, and we take it more seriously than you do. And fair enough, right? That could be where it ends up, but I do think that my own personal experience for the entire arc of this whole thing, I've been here for the whole thing, right? I went to some of the first meetups. I've been here for all of it. And I know all the personalities. I've watched the whole thing happen. And I think there's a core question underneath that, which is like, does the effect, and it's basically, I think, Paul, what your pitch was, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but is there something about just chewing on this endlessly that actually has the opposite of maybe the hope for intent, which I assume would be to strengthen your faith?
Well, Phlebas makes the comment, substituting the internet community can satisfy your desire to actually visit a church. And right away, when this thing started, I became a pastor for a whole group of people that weren't going to church. Some of those people have now gone to church and others haven't. And that tends to happen differently for different people. I think even Mark's departure from the church that he was going to and his churchlessness for a while now, the TLC has sort of been a place where church haunted or Christ haunted people hang out, but not just Christ haunted. You've got, it'll be really interesting to see what happens with the 500 or so new subs from Islam that have come. And because it usually takes about a year or two before they start creeping in at this level. So it's sort of like the question about Estuary. For some of the people that go to my local Estuary, they go to Estuary, they don't go to church, and they're getting some of those same needs met. I have a lot more people in my church who go to church and not Estuary, because why would you go to Estuary when they already have a Bible study? So in other words, the question of where exactly does this help meet people? And then, of course, the guy who's going to talk after you has a very different answer, which is that the TLC was very instrumental in bringing him to a church, and a Catholic church, and embracing that tradition, very intentionally and openly. And, what's so cool about this is Neil and you and Mark, we all shared a weekend in Connecticut at my sister's house, which just deepens it all even more. And another guy from our Connecticut group who came in. So the TLC is sort of a weird institutionless thing that is processing things in that bandwidth. And as a pastor, I am very comfortable especially because, the stuff that Noah points out in his story with this Catholic guy, I am very comfortable with long relationships and long conversations, because I saw in the work of my father, I mean, he had relationships going over decades with people that went somewhere important. And I'm also part of a tradition that says, Rod, Christ is your judge, not me.
Because you've mentioned your father, most of you maybe even know this already, but a beautiful part of the story is we discovered many years after meeting that my uncle and your father, after he retired, were in a Bible study together because they were both two guys that would read the Bible with anybody who would read it with them, right? So,
Yeah.
and my uncle was at your father's funeral that you eulogized your father at. So, and we learned that many years later. So it's just a beautiful little connection, personal connection.
Yeah, yeah.
One thing that I wanted to, because I've had a similar question, like, what is this for? Like the whole like TLC Estuary.
It was Trump that said, "Oh, Paul and his heretics." That was from
Paul,
Trump.
Yeah,
that's from Trip. Sorry,
Yeah.
Trip Trump. They get confused in my mind.
Yes, Trump and I are very similar people. But one thing that I started thinking about it, and there might be a little bit of survivor bias here also, whenever we're seeing what's going on within the TLC and Estuary groups and that kind of thing. And so for people who don't know what survivor bias is you would, it came from like you look at planes when they landed in like World War II, World War I, and see where were their bullet holes, right? And they think, okay, we'll see where the bullet holes are and we'll reinforce that part of the plane because that's where they're getting shot, right? And so, but it was the completely incorrect conclusion because those were the only planes that survived that got shot there. They got shot anywhere else, they never made it, right? And so like you should have been reinforcing everywhere but where the bullet holes were. So there's a lot of people that are going to come into somewhere like TLC or the Estuary group for a time, and they're going to be here briefly. They're going to pop in and out, and then they're going to go back to their churches and be deeper in that community. And they will not be on a lot of these live streams and everything else like that. You might get the impression, well, TLC is leading people away from church and only onto online, but that's because you're not seeing those people, right? Like, so there's another girl that, Luke and Sam and I are really good friends with, Sarah. She was very active early on with like Pajot and Peterson, that kind of stuff. And now she's not nearly as active within this group as she used to be. And she's much more active in her church. So, but you would never know that because she was here briefly and then she's out. And so there's a certain kind of survivorship bias where you might see a lot of people lingering around TLC and you were just not aware of all the people that popped in, got what they needed and helped them, and then now they're really deeply into their community. So I think that like sometimes you can get a very skewed view if you just watch these all the time. That's just my 2 cents.
All right, Neil Daedalus.
Hey, can you hear me okay?
We hear you great.
Okay. I'm going to start with Rod's question underneath all of this. And I think the question is actually, what is life all about? Like, what's the point? I mean, that's what Rod keeps pointing to. And really the point of points is like, why are we here? Like, what are we doing? What's the point? The journey, and I'm going to come at this from 2 angles. The journey for many of us that deconstructed or partially deconstructed and then came back to the faith was a vertical journey, meaning we were being drawn up into God, and we're rediscovering what it means to worship, what it means to think upwards, you could say, rather than the things that were presented in the here and now, and instead thinking beyond the here and now. But that vertical journey inevitably has to change and transform. There's a period, so Carl Jung would call it the ego inflation, but there's a period of time where you have a transformative experience. And then sometimes people get stuck in that period of time where they keep expecting the God hits to just keep hitting. The God heroin isn't hitting quite as well as it did in the beginning. And I think that's where the pivot to the horizontal happens. For me, it was a sense that I was still missing something. I didn't have friendship in my local church community, even though my faith was growing every day in my local church community. And I really liked your definition, Paul, PBK, about church is a place where you can love and serve. And that's been key for me. Like I need to be able to do things that I feel are both edifying to other people, loving other people, but also loving God. And if I'm able to do that, whether it's singing, music, Bible study, whatever it is, then I'm golden. So first vertical, then horizontal. And I think that's what TLC has been for me, is connecting to horizontal. I have so many friends that I think of as some of my best friends now because of this space. And I have no intention of casting those friendships aside. I want to quickly outline 2 different ways I've thought about this whole journey. One is the idea of a mountain. And I think as times are good, we're each climbing up a mountain. Even Rod is pursuing the good, you know, even as a non-practicing, like he's pursuing something that is good. And most everyone except, you know, a small subset of people are pursuing the good of their own understanding, you could say. So they're climbing a mountain. Some paths up the mountain are a lot rockier and more difficult than others. Some paths have really good, you know, they have terrain that has been worn down by years by other people traveling first. Those people know the way, they can point you in the right direction. There are good rest stops. There's plenty of things that can help you up the mountain. And then, so that's one analogy, up the mountain. But there's another analogy, which we've talked about, which is on the ocean. And so let's say we're all sailing in a giant ship, and the giant ship has been really good at taking care of us, but there's lots of fighting. There's lots of fighting amidst the giant ship. And then what happens is people say, well, we can, there's an island over there. Let's build our own ship. So they build their own ship, and they build their own ship. And they're sailing relatively close together in a flotilla over many, many years, over a century or two. You know, so you get more and more of these smaller and smaller ships. And when times are good and the ocean is flat, you can have small ships and move very quickly and things are good. But then imagine that, you know, the storm's approaching, and imagine the waves are getting rougher, waves are getting tossing. And those small ships that did so well in the beginning, they're now having a harder time, you know, amidst the choppy waves. And then the storm hits and some of the ships get capsized and others are like falling apart. And so like, I think of my church and I mean this both in my local community, but the tradition that I'm in, I think of that as in the AA model of church, which is like, when people reach out for help, we need to be as receptive. And I think about TLC in much the same way, actually. When people reach out for help, we need to be receptive and ready to receive them in meekness and in help. And if as churches and as individuals and as bodies, if we are not ready to serve and help, then we're in the wrong mindset. If it's like, you have to get into our boat because our boat is the only perfect righteous boat, versus like, no, our boat is here to help. Like we're the real FEMA. We're here to help during the ship. So that's all I wanted to say. It's how I think of both individual church, a tradition, and this space that we call TLC. Corn cob, Mr. PVK. Corn cob.
Christopher, everybody's loving seeing your face. Regular
Well,
commenter, welcome. Thanks for your patience. What do you have on your mind?
I just wanted to say that my insight I had while listening to you all was that tradition is the technology that allows people to connect and relate, and institutions are an incidental byproduct of that. And so I don't really have time to stay and talk, so I can't just gonna leave that here and run away and get back to the real world.
Real quick.
But I wanted to share that and say thank you for that.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Christopher. No, because institutions, and you know, we've had Rod was on with Green with Paul Allen about institutions, because institutions try to preserve traditions. That's what institutions do. They try to lengthen. I mean, human beings sort of spin off traditions, but then they need to be preserved, and institutions allows things to happen, but they're always human collectives, so they get complicated. So it's a good point. Michael Sartori, what Michael's got some things to say.
Yeah, well, so I guess I'm Methodist now. I don't know, that's weird.
You're Methodist now?
I don't know.
Do you know the method man, the method man, the method?
I mean, it's just basically I'm still waiting for somebody at our old church to call and say, where have you been? And that hasn't happened yet. So that's where I'm at. But, you know, it's just funny because, like, I mean, I understand, you know, kind of the things that Mark is bringing up and wanting to, like, even with, like, the Christian, the atheist thing, or like, and it's always like, I don't know, when you get the group think, the consensus, you know, it just starts to break down, or it just, you know, it demands such a level of people to hold on to a cognitive dissonance just to like make sense of regular life, it just stops working. And so you might have people go along with it like outwardly, but it doesn't mean anything, or you get visible shakeups. Like even so, I started reading this book a little bit about Dante and his comedy, and the author is very, very clear to say we shouldn't call it the Divine Comedy, because that was like a later publishing edition that cast the whole thing in the wrong light, because he's just roasting the church all through it. And essentially what this guy's saying is Dante and his other poet friends had adopted a lot of this Islamic philosophy, and it's basically like a pitch for Islamic universalism. That's what Dante was aiming for. But essentially he was saying like the church got so high on its own supply by, with the authority and just saying like this is who's in and that's who's out, that it just is like and there was simony and all this stuff, and it's just like it's lost all its credibility. But then it's like that just happens over and over again. That's like why we have Mormons, that's why we have everybody, and it's like there's like a short shelf life of these things. So I mean, and then at the end of the day, now when you just have all these traditions, I mean, the thing is that you can go to any of these churches and you'll find some of the people where it's like it makes sense, and you can tell these are like godly people, and they're being godly people within whatever weird, Mormon language, Catholic language, Presbyterian language. And then you'll have the same people, they'll have other people that are using all the same language, and they're closed-minded, and they don't love people, and whatever. So, I mean, yeah. So you just we can't. It's a problem that we can't address with words, like, and that's why I think that's why we need the creative churn. And when it's done in a healthy way, it's when splitting doesn't mean that both parties are anathematizing each other, and like then things actually go a lot better. You may actually have like growth and things more quickly, but it's tough. I mean, and that's the thing where we're at, because I think in some ways Jesus is a heretic, according to the at least according to the Romans, probably according to the Jews, and he got killed for it. And like that's the thing, is that every time a heretic gets killed, they're always right. It doesn't matter if they're a heretic, you're right when you get killed for it. But now we don't get killed for it. So that's the thing we have to figure out. Like you just get shadow banned or something. So
all right. Mike Baumeister, I hope he comes back, because you sent me your book and I started reading it and I was enjoying it, but I'm ADHD and it turned away, but this is a book I still want to read. So Mike, thanks. You have to unmute. There should be a button there to unmute. I can't unmute you. I can do a lot of things on this end, but unmute is something I cannot do. Oh, I can unmute. Okay, I tried that. No, let's see if that works.
He just froze.
He's struggling. You cannot unmute your guest because they chose. Oh, there we go. We hear you. Mike, we hear you. Your mic's on. What do you have to say?
I think he's in an airport.
But he sent me his book. Grew up CRC, Calvin's last pupil. So let's see, is it self-published, or there's a nice note for me in his book. I hope we can see. We'll have to get you on for a rando, Mike. I mean, anybody who writes a book and sends it to me, well, I have gotten some other books before too. Well, Mark, Why don't you talk until Mike comes back?
Okay. I want to talk about what Neil and Mark said, but a quick message to Skankenstein, if he's listening. When I was in the green room, I was just tapping out a tune, and I realized I could reverse headbang with this beard. I won't try it now, but I'll give it a go at some point.
That's what
Sorry.
you want to tell us?
No, what Neil was saying about the vertical and the horizontal, and I've said this to Mark 3 times now. Mark has the vertical. He doesn't know where to place the horizontal. Which Neil kind of hinted at. But there's a place we can get to where the horizontal and the vertical kind of merge into one. I don't know how to phrase it better than that.
I think it's called the cross, brother.
I'll go with that. Okay, you guys discuss. That's my thought, and I think Jordan Hall is rapidly reaching this conclusion as well. So give it a not very long, because he's dead smart, and he'll probably be saying the same thing, maybe in another language.
I've talked enough, but I would love to hear Mark D. Parker talk about. You treated it as if it was a logical conclusion that if this Catholic thing doesn't stick, then that's the end of the road for you. And I mean, I thought that was interesting.
There's probably not enough space now to talk about it, but I could, if we should come on and we could actually have another talk. Yeah, that because to do it right, and I don't want to consume all the oxygen. I would just say that when Michael talked about cognitive dissonance, you know, and how all these different groups process the meaning of life through these cognitively dissonant ideas. Well, I'm wondering, you know, again, I'm back to, well, how important is the Bible? I mean, and the Bible is full of, yeah, I mean, you could talk about Jesus was a heretic and he got killed for it. Bart Ehrman doesn't have a problem with that. Rod doesn't have a problem with that. Paul Vanderklay doesn't have a problem with that. The difference is one of those three people say, but he rose from the dead. And he ascended into heaven and sits on the throne of God. And he will resurrect you, you know, as a result, and so on and so forth. Now, that's where things break down, and you have, and that's the point at which you have to choose. And that's fine, Rod. I mean, Rod, it's not. I'm not attacking you personally. I'm just saying that, you know, you and Paul Vanderklay are on two sides of the ledger.
Pistols at dawn, Paul.
We're gonna shoot Dawn. I like Dawn.
But enough of that. But I just say I don't. That's what that goes to, maybe somewhat to answer your question about why it's all or nothing.
Well, and the thing about, you know, with Homerum's video today, what so interested me, I really enjoyed the conversation with Dalthit, except the fact that Ross had these things he wanted to fight with, and I thought that's not interesting to me about Ehrman's lack of faith doesn't interest me that much. What's interesting to me is when he says, I really like Jesus, I wish it were true. Because in a sense, that's what he's saying. He says, I really like the ideas. I really like this love. This has changed our civilization. I'm down for that. But Jesus is still an idiot because of how he chose to live his life.
Fucking genius idiot.
He said that.
Jesus is an idiot because if he was smart, he wouldn't have got killed by the Romans. Now, maybe we remember him nicely, but what did that ever do for Jesus? Then you have to say, well, he gave his life up for the world. Yeah, but now we're beginning into the foothills of that place that Ehrman doesn't want to go.
There's a thread that I have pulled on multiple times that no one seems to want to pick up, and it's so important in my mind, which is the thread of identity as what I'm receiving is how most of the world thinks. The identity I have is how people treat me as this. I'm this race, I'm this sex, I'm in this job. I'm receiving that identity from other people versus the identity versus what I'm giving, what I'm generating, what I'm providing, what I'm doing. And the identity question to me is so obvious once you flip that polarity. It's so obvious what the problem is. Because if I need to have my identity fundamentally determined by specific people in my life, I'm a slave to those people. And we say what? We say we're a slave to Christ. That's what we say. And there's a reason for that, is because that way we can give our identity through Christ to the, and no, sorry, I'm going to keep harping on it because no one's talking. It's so obvious to me that that's the solution. It's, yeah.
Well, I was going to say, like, even in that frame, I think the trouble is that you're still receiving it from Christ, right? But it's like you're receiving it from the highest thing, and that's the most important piece. And I think the problem is we don't work up the ladder. Like we don't say like, okay, what gives this person the right to define my identity? Like who's the person who gives them permission? Or, what is the next level? You have to keep climbing it. I think people get stuck at certain places and they say, I need to sit at wherever I am and work on it and not keep, going through that process over and over again.
Can I use a more sciencey word?
Oh, did we lose Jonathan? Oh, shoot, we lost Jonathan.
We have transmitters. Yeah? Comes down, goes out. What comes down? That's curious, because sometimes it's just BS. Because it's not coming down from the right place.
Well, I think Neil is absolutely right in what he's saying, and I think what Noah's saying, and this is the thing I think is the problem, is with it like there's a lot of people who get that thing of like my identity is rooted in Christ. You have this personal faith. But as soon as you're going to go out in the world and like start saying I'm a Christian and I believe this, then everybody's going to look at all the other like labels that you have. For me, it's husband, father, even carpenter, and they're going to look at how I operate in those things. And so like the thing for me is I have to figure, I can't just say like, well, I just am a husband. And so that's what, whatever I do is the definition of what a husband is. No, I have to see what Jesus says being a husband means and then live that and confess every time I don't live it so that the word husband actually means something because, and essentially so that the word Christian means something because we could say, oh, it's, do you believe in the resurrection? And I think like all the Christians on the screen here say like, yes, I believe in the resurrection and I believe you all really mean it. But there's a whole lot of other people who say, I'm a Christian, I believe in the resurrection, and there is no evidence of that in their life. And that's why, the Bart Ehrmans of the world don't believe it, because because everybody says that it's a stupid way to live by not living like Jesus.
Can I ask?
It's a stupid way to live.
Can I ask Rod a question? It's not a gotcha question, Rod. It's not a gotcha question. It's more so. I'm curious how you think about when we say the vertical, because, or another way of putting this is like, where do your interests, desires, values fundamentally come from? Like, is it a biological essentialism? Or like where do those things that are beyond your choice, but the things that you are presented as something that you're interested in or find, like your interest in this space is a perfect example of
that. Before I forget, I would never draw the conclusion that Paul drew, that Jesus would have been an idiot if he didn't raise from the dead. And I see those as two, as Mark Parker's, those are cousins to each other. Like both of those things don't seem intuitively obvious to me. Like how you go from that to that, I don't get that. And maybe in part that might start to answer, at least address your impossibly difficult question, Neil. You know, why am I interested in this? Like, do you know why you're interested in this?
No,
I mean,
yeah.
Sometimes you're just interested, right? When people, you know, my shorthand usually when people do what I've done to PPK many times, it's like, what are you up to, Rod? I'll say something like, well, I'm just recruiting pallbearers. You know, I'm just campaigning for a large few. You know, obviously it's absurd, but I was so deeply marinated in the biblical stories, I literally learned to read on the Bible. And by the way, I actually recommend that to anybody if you can do it. Like, I mean, at any point in my childhood, would I have opted out? Absolutely. Because that's not how I wanted to spend my mornings, right? But now I see the benefit of it, right? As a, you know, older adult, right? And so I can kind of like see world events and kind of just squint, and I can access all of these, not just the biblical stories, obviously mythology and other things too, right? So to be informed by those stories to help me locate myself in the world. Sometimes I'll say I'm just trying to have a healthy relationship with reality, right? I'm just trying to calibrate to the world as I encounter it, knowing full well there are so many things I'll never know. I can't possibly know. And I just have to try to, you know, reconcile myself to that. And so I have to show up in the world still. So I do try, you know, informed by those values, right? But I don't claim to know what it all means or where it's all going or where I will end up. I don't. That's why I never label myself. I would, like, some people will try to do it to me, but I would never do it to myself, right? I would never say, well, I'm a this or I'm a that or I'm not a this. I'm not like, all I can say is I'm just showing up and trying to be meaningfully engaged with this miraculous thing that I find myself in, right? That's the best I can do.
I think one piece of this this conversation with Ehrman came up. It keeps coming up is the role of hypocrisy, and how does this relate into all of this? And I wrote something a while back, a quick tweet. It was, hypocrisy is the logical result of an imperfect person pursuing a sufficiently high ideal. This idea that, like, the most authentic person you can think of is, you know, a piece of crap who acts like a piece of crap, right? Like, if that's our standard, then like that's why. I mean, not to get political, but there's a reason why that there's
plenty of those.
Authenticity is a major component. So like these are the things that we're valuing. Is that, like, if the person presents as they really are, then like there's no barrier there. But like that's not the most important thing. The most important thing is, do you have a high ideal and are you pursuing it? And that's going to require some levels of hypocrisy and falling short. I think what we're troubled by most of the time is that people aren't following through. Like, they're not reacting to the hypocrisy. They kind of just blow it off and say, it's not that important, right? But like, no, actually it is. Like, there's a level of, like, you need to be conscious of how you are falling short of your ideals, and also saying, you know, how am I going to continue on that journey, and what grace do I need to be able to continue just existing?
That's the standard. The standard in Christianity is not to perfectly keep the law, because you can't. And it actually, like, so in 1 John it says, if you say you are without sin, you make him a liar. You're making God a liar if you say you don't sin. So it's actually, the thing is to always be confessing, so that you're like, that's the honesty is the more important thing. Like, you should reach for the standard, but you also have to be honest about your inability to do so, while still striving for it, so you don't, you know, give up.
One more piece on this before I stop. There's a clip of a Norm Macdonald joke, and he's in a car with Jerry Seinfeld, and they're sitting side by side. And Norm Macdonald's talking about the Bill Cosby situation. He said, a comedian friend of mine was talking about this, and he's like, this is so horrible. The hypocrisy that Bill Cosby showed in his actions. And Norm's like, well, I don't know if the hypocrisy was the worst part, you know. First, it was,
Oh,
the sexual
man.
assault, the scheming,
Yeah, we
the
get it.
dwelling on it. Then way down here, that's the hypocrisy.
This might be the first time anyone has invoked Norm Macdonald. So, like, God bless you. I'm yeah, love it. That's why
All
we
right.
have you use Gen Zs around here. That's great.
Yeah. Okay, Alan, what say you? Is the hypocrisy the worst thing about you,
The
or is
hypocrisy.
there more?
I just couldn't stand Rod's hypocrisy. How dare he be honest with us? No, that was the worst part.
Alan came with the roofies.
I just no, I with some of the naming stuff and what Michael brought up of it just made me think of, I have a friend who's going through premarital counseling, getting ready to get married, and he wasn't born a Christian, but he's now a Christian and now going through Christian premarital counseling. And talking to him, it's just funny because it's like the stuff he's talking about is so Christian coded and so specific to his like domain and what does it mean to like, using terms like the head of the marriage and to lead and to be a good husband, blah, blah, blah. It's like if I went to everyone I know who's married, who's not in my church, they'd be like, what are you talking about? What is it? None of this makes any sense at all. This is gobbledygook. But it's like, okay, are other people not husbands? Are they not married? Are people in the church not husbands? Are they not married? And it's like, well, the answer is yes, they're husbands and yes, they're married. But what we mean by that word is completely different, and how to be a good one is measured completely differently. And I think that part of this space's value is, we don't have a communal language. I mean, we have a bigger pond we're swimming in. We have a global world where people in Yemen can tune into this stream. And also, we have, all sorts of things. So I think part of the value here, just to, cinch it up into one idea, is just, it's like you need to talk it through. Okay, what would Attila the Hun say makes a good husband? What would Jesus say makes a good husband? They might be different. I'm not certain, but I think they might be different. So you need to like have some ability to, with people that you trust, have conversations around any. It doesn't have to be marriage. It doesn't have to be religion. It could be any topic.
All right.
Amen. Amen.
Mark.
So, can you hear me?
Yes.
So I want to ask Michael a question, but I'll share a story with my wife who's just about finished an Eckhart Tolle book. So she's my wife, she's a mother, she's a daughter, she's a cousin, she's a friend. She's all these labels. And then she asks me, but who am I? So I thought that kept in line with the conversation. But I wanted to ask Michael, how many times did Jesus say you should change your child's nappy?
7 times 7.
Lifetime?
No, I don't
Lifetime?
think he said that. I don't think he said that. But I mean, he washed people's feet, so
All right. I think the stream has come to an end. Thank you all for the original participants, of which we're down to 2, and thank you those who jumped in later.
We don't get to do final thoughts?
Absolutely. Let's have the final thoughts. See, we have a tradition.
Yeah, we have our liturgies to honor here. Well, actually, all I'm going to say, first of all, I'm going to say I'm sorry that Noah left, because he mentioned that, he was the only Gen Zer around here, and he's just glad that, he could add his voice. First of all, that voice. But I'm so glad he does and is, because I just really appreciate that. And that whole cohort too, all of you guys. And then I would love to hear more someday, no rush, from both you, PDK, and you, Mark, about this logical sequence, that therefore it was all in vain, and that Jesus was basically just a fool. And maybe Paul's comment about, if without the resurrection, what are we doing here? Basically, is in there.
That was
somewhere.
That was Ehrman's.
I heard that.
Too.
Yeah, I heard that. Yeah. So anyway, to me that strikes me as a rich vein of inquiry, because it just is not automatic to me. I don't see the automatic connection there.
Good, Matt.
Oh, I'm just here to shield and grip for a second here. This little zine.substack.com. I mean, 55 pages of genuine original short fiction written by TLC members. We've been working on it for the last like 3 months. I am incredibly proud of the work these guys put in, and we would love to hear reactions and your thoughts.
There, we'll pin that.
Okay, I was trying to figure out how. There we go. Okay.
Yeah, you kept putting in the private chat. It's like I already know how to find it.
I had put it in both spots and I got bounced.
I pinned it, so it's nice there
Appreciate
at the top of the comments. So, no, I'm thinking, Rod, I'm gonna have to make a video because it's a really interesting. That's what fascinates me about Ehrman and really grabbed me about. I'm really anxious to read his new book because I've read his book on Jesus Victory with real appreciation, and I appreciate a lot about Ehrman. I really do. But then it's funny because I'm not a theologian, I'm a pastor, and so I take a look at people and the moves that they make and why, and that's the part that really fascinates me. Even though I hold nothing against him, even though others, when I mention his name, I hear it because he had a lot of students. He had a lot of students, and some of those students are around here.
When I brought him up on that thing we did with Paul Allen, I didn't even realize it was a controversial thing to say. It struck me as very interesting.
Yeah, but I found it to be very interesting, and I like his. I think his books are interesting, but and then there's also the element that I was going to mention before. It's also sort of once you know a few more things about, let's say, the broader conversation in New Testament studies. It's sort of like if the only psychology comes from Jordan Peterson, your picture of psychology and the state of the conversation it's just sort of the dilemma of a lot. So not everybody's ready to sort of trip over and bend the knee to Bart Ehrman's positions on many of these things, but I think they're very interesting positions, and he's a good scholar. I don't think that's not debated. So, any other final thoughts?
Well, I would just. Oh, sorry, Mark. Go ahead.
Okay. Brett Weinstein, we all know. Evolutionary biologist. It's all about getting your genes into the future, which is not something I agree with. But let's pretend it's true. So you want your own genes, and failing that, you want your family genes, and failing that, you want your cousin's genes, and failing that, you want your tribe's genes to come into the future. But you could say from that point of view that Christ's genes we still remember him 2,000 years later. So how is that a failure? How is that idiotic?
It's not the genes, it's the memes. Metal Gear Solid 2, not Metal Gear Solid 1.
And
that's also a Brett Weinstein thing. Is the memes and the genes, a la Richard Dawkins. So, yeah, and that's the whole Genghis Khan, Jesus Christ thing. And then, but that gets into anthropology. What is a human being? Is a human being primarily a container of genes or a container of memes?
Biologists. And I'll just plug my Substack, uneducated philosopher. Substack.
Educated or uneducated? You're uneducated, right?
Uneducated, sorry.
Just again, we'll just have to do. Maybe we'll do. I'm gonna say a threesome. Don't want to put it like that, but my mind goes. This is why I don't deserve to be a Catholic. My goes really dark.
I'll be your Huckleberry.
He lives in California.
What? Just to again, well, I can't possibly tie up all the loose ends and persuade you, Rod. But but it's in Buddhist language. It's all future life. Why this? Why ultimately I think Bart Ehrman's wrong. The significance of Christ is not found in his place in history. It's found in the resurrection, and it's found in that absurd. You can't possibly prove it. The real meaning is in our. We live for the future, in a sense. We live for the otherworldly. We give up the material here and now. We sacrifice, endure, suffer. At least this is what we're called to. Not all Christians do, aka Paula White or something. We surrender power on earth to have the power to live in eternity. That's the calling, the great leap of faith. So, but there's a lot of unpacking to do there, and how we this is part of our problem with our discussion today. It's how we parse this out between Christians is incredibly challenging. Che calls me out for diverting the discussion in the wrong direction, and Tripp thinks I misunderstand history entirely or something. But this is Christians struggle with this. I mean, but I think ultimately it is about the resurrection. The Apostle Paul himself said, if the resurrection isn't real, we're to be pitied. We're pathetic, and in the world's eyes, we are pathetic. I mean, true Christians are pathetic people from a worldly perspective. But
I'd love to go around with you on this, but we won't do it here.
We can't do it here, so we're going to have that threesome. PVK, Rod, me. We'll do it. Make it happen, Paul. Make it happen.
All right, I'm down for it. I'm down for it. All right, thank you, everyone. Oh, Michael Sartori, final thought.
My final thought.
And Matt.
Just want to say, I'm up to 2 books, and I'm still at 0 PVK interviews. So,
I guess we'll have to make that happen too.
Yep.
Tents over temples.
Tents before temples.
Tents before temples. 800 pages.
And the way of the Tecton is much shorter. It's only like 260 pages. So.
Way of the Tecton.
Only.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Comparative.
Yeah.
All right.
Back in the days when I used to read books.
And was this typed out or was it prompted?
No, it's all my words.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right. Skank, you get the final word.
Bye. Thanks. This is fun.
Put your mic up to your mouth.
Oh, there is. Gosh. Is this any better?
Yeah, that's better.
Geez. Okay, there we go. Oh, I was just going to say bye. Thanks, guys. Thanks for letting me hang out. It's a good time.
Yeah, thanks for tolerating me, folks.
Good talking.
Rod, you got to stop that language. It's not toleration. You think we don't want you here. I mean, there's so many other people. Actually, I always appreciate it because I know there are way, way, way more people with your perspective. It's just the religion makes people yap. Maybe that's something. Maybe it's a mind virus to make us yap. But I get plenty of emails from people that share your perspective. And so that's why I regularly want you coming out here and saying what you say. So you take it, you do it for them. So
the Paul
I'd definitely be
tradition.
interested in hearing you like have a serious conversation, but like how do we make more space for where folks like you feel more welcome? Like I'm trying to figure out that.
Yeah,
like,
a short version of that, because that has come up many times privately.
Yeah.
And sometimes on here. I did a little project a while ago. We called it Nuance Forum. And basically the whole idea was if you have more questions than answers, that you're probably one of us, right? And that's back in 2018. You know,
right. I think I've seen some of those.
And we gathered a whole group of folks that just wanted to chew on stuff together, but with this ethos that like we don't really know, but it's interesting and it's great to learn. And you know, if we can inform ourselves even better, right? So I think a spirit of inquiry versus, so it's the difference between knowing and not knowing, really.
Mm.
At least as a posture, right? So if every question already has an answer and everyone knows what the answer is, it's like it just ends. A lot of conversations just kind of stop before they get started, I guess. That's my experience.
It's a closed system. But the funny thing about religious people is they don't seem to, even though they're always trying to sell their answers.
I know we're at the end of this thing, but I just saw something in the chat that can't be dismissed. Is clarifications Claire the sociologist?
Yes.
Yeah.
Is Claire the sociologist have a baby? When did Claire?
I know. I saw that too. I'm like, wait a
What
minute.
the heck?
I didn't see that.
Why didn't nobody? I didn't get an invite to the shower. What is this?
We need a TLC online shower for Claire. Congratulations, Claire. Good for you. Yay.
My baby just took a convenient nap.
Well, she has a good excuse for not finishing that dissertation too.
One heck of a dodge.
Baby.
We had pizza after what was it? Was it Northwest Estuary? And there was no baby then, at least not to my knowledge.
Northwest Estuary was a while ago.
It was. But that
Babies
not that
happen
long
fast.
ago. Babies take 9 months typically.
Well, yeah, I'm sure it didn't feel fast to Claire, but
Well done.
Well done, Claire. Well done. Congratulations.
We love
celebrate
babies.
you. This corner is very pro baby. It's a very pro baby corner.
All right. That was
All
it.
right.
Awesome.
All right. Thank you
Yeah.
all. I'm going to play some branding. What? Oh, just in honor of our new mother.
Also in today's community report, Clara, our resident sociologist, had some relevant things to say to the world.
So this is my kitchen. You can even see that there is a fly trap behind me. That's something I would have removed if I had really thought about this, because that is disgusting. Right now I am roasting chicken to eat later today. And I feel like I need to justify that to myself and to the world, like literally to the world, because I'm live streaming.
Ducks eat bread.
They do. They like it.
Still I have it. There are moments I conveniently forget that I'm a 40-year-old man. The last vestiges of a ghost long dead. The ghost with a messiah complex. A messiah too lazy to rise or ascend. Happily hurt and hard. The hanger-on or haunting of a time past. A heroic dream of the harrowing of hell. Failure to launch. Cling to a life vest. Treading in spells that linger and last. Mom and Dad, righteous and mad, daydreamers with ghosts of their own. My memory of them stoic, looking with aims to pretend. Always on the brink of somewhere. Each a child dancing on the fence. On down the river. Dreamt in the sunshine. Saturday morning cartoons, the only Sabbath I knew. A disciple of Jim Henson and John Hughes. Worship in cathedrals where the Toys R Us. Baptized in ball pits. A clown served the sacrament we eat. More Pepsi and Pizza Hut. Say please. Say cheese. Between Kurt Cobain, a scrambled cable screen, towers tumbling, Super Bowls, and reality TV, the ghost is constitutionally unwilling and intrinsically unable to see and be seen, searching madly for attention to seek. But you could be anything. Never say never. If you've got nothing nice to say, don't say nothing, ever. Don't talk to strangers, see what I say, just do it. You don't listen very well, do you? You don't do very well, do you? You're not looking too good, are you? Keep up. Appearances aren't what they seem. Will you ever grow up? You look like you're stuck. I think you took too much. Echoes the ghost within the host, who prays the dead bury their dead and stay buried in a fading dream.
Where are you here?
Oh, there I am. Hey.
Where are you? Where?
Got me?
Oh boy. Yeah. Walk with me, Lord. Walk with me.
Come on, man.
Walk with me, Lord. Walk with me. All along this Jesus journey. Walk with me, Lord. Walk with me. Yeah.
Walk with my mama.
Yeah, walk with my mama.
Walk with me.
Walk with me too.
You walk with my mama.
Yeah.
Walk with me.
And walk with me too.
Oh, my.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jesus journey.
I want Jesus.
Want Jesus.
Walk with me.
Walk with me. Hold my hand, Lord. Hold my hand. Hold my hand, Lord. Hold my hand. All along this Jesus journey. Hold my hand, Lord. And hold my hand.
Walk with Moses.
You walk with Moses.
Walk with me.
Walk with me.
You walk with Moses. Walk with me.
Walk with me.
While I'm home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jesus journey.
I want Jesus.
I want Jesus to walk with me.
Say, walk with me, Lord. How y'all doing?
Walk with me. Walk with me,
Lord. Walk with me.
Walk with me.
Come on, my
Yeah, Lord.
I want Jesus.
I want Jesus
to walk with me.
To walk with me. Walk with David, a little shepherd boy. Yeah, you made him a great king. I know David shouted for joy. He walked with David, and he little shepherd boy. You made him a great king. And David shouted for joy.
That's right.
Oh, yeah. So walk with me, Lord. Walk with me. Walk with me, Lord. Walk with me. All along this Jesus journey. Walk with me, Lord. Walk with me. You gotta walk with me, Lord.
Yeah! That was rocking great, brother.
Oh, yeah.